I ask you, what would happen if right in front of your eyes, your only love was taken from you? She begged you to save her, but you didn't have the power to do it. Your legs were not moving, you lacked both courage and strength. The great magician claims that everything is useless, that in this world, everything is about power, and for some reason, even he does not know, they're taking her away. The power of existence is above everything. And that day marked Aruta's life so deeply that she devoted her entire existence to the pursuit of power. More than 60 years have passed. He tried all the methods, tried to reach the treasure of the most dangerous dungeon in the world, and right there, he died without achieving it. He lived his whole life chasing power, and after his death, he found himself before God. Whoever possessed the terror of God earned the right to meet him in the afterlife. God offers you a choice: to rest your soul forever, or to relive the suffering of life for another 20 years. So to save his life and his one true love, he chooses to be reborn and retrace his steps. And this is how the Prota gets his second chance, returning to the moment of his birth, seeing his parents, his mother again, beautiful and long-haired, and to her father, who was still present. Determined not to waste a single second of his life, he wanted to start evolving right then and there. But his baby body couldn't even stand up. One thing he didn't have in his previous life was the ability to see a system window. With his stats and skills, something that only he could see now. The boy, barely a month old, was trying to talk, thinking that he was really getting it. Remember that God allowed him to choose a gift. Not knowing what that meant, God explains that everyone is blessed with a gift too. The gift of unbalanced wisdom, the gift of broken martial arts, the gift of absurdly powerful magic, or even the gift of infinite charisma. It could also be the gift of inventive genius, or finally, the gift of creation. In her past life, Aruta had the gift of wisdom, and God asks her if she wants the same. This time, the Prota says he wants a different gift, the gift of creation. The Prota, with the wisdom of his past life, knew the 5 gifts of the world. But he had never heard of the creation that God had mentioned. So he aimed for that one. The first thing the Prota notices is a system window that is unknown in this world. So it could be related to his new gift. In addition to wanting to save the life of the person he loved, the Prota also remembers his parents, who died when he was only 8 years old. It had been so long that I barely remembered it. It happened on the night of his 8th birthday, an attack by goblins on his village. All she remembers is feeling pain when her father sacrificed himself so that his wife and children could escape. When even that wasn't enough, his mother threw him away and begged him to, at the very least, run alone. With no other choice, he just ran. And as we know, goblins are lascivious creatures, so you can imagine what happened after Aruta escaped. But enough of suffering and sad things for now. In his second life, he will do things differently. The first step is to study and improve your intelligence and mental power statistics. He studied so much that even his mother thought he was bad. Joking with his father, he trained his mana stats. While children his age were eating dirt and drawing on the ground, the guy was doing parkour. While other children watched in amazement, their agility status and evasion skill level increased. This pattern continued every time Aruto discovered a new skill. 8 years passed in an instant. Aruto was sitting under a tree, perfecting his innate gift and his abilities that were growing steadily in power. When his mother returned home, she congratulated Aruto on his 8th birthday. Overflowing with joy, he hugged his son so tightly that Aruto was afraid he would crush him. His father boasted that Aruto's attractiveness came from him and stated that they would start Aruto's training immediately, a suggestion that his mother approved of without hesitation. His mother congratulated Aruto again, reminding him of his visit to the church at night, to which he agreed. It was customary for all children who turned 8 to receive special bracelets. These bracelets served as a form of identity card, and now it was Aruto's turn to receive his. The priest told Aruto to hold out his hands. Aruto, standing in the church, obeyed, and the priest placed on his wrist a magic bracelet that proved Aruto's identity. It is better to go to the big city with this, the priest advised him. Be careful not to lose it. With the bracelet now on his wrist, Aruto thought finally. His thoughts then turned to the goblins who were due to arrive at the village in a few hours. Haruto was already crying. He knew he had to pull himself together. The time had come. Remembering his past self, Haruto resolved to save this village. After leaving the church and arriving at the forest, Haruto opened his skill panel to check his progress. He checked his current status. Haruto noticed that he probably needed to reach level 15 to significantly increase his physical power. His magic, however, was at level 32, granting him mastery over all the skills accumulated during his 8 years. The only skill that Haruto didn't fully understand was the ability to create various functional objects. He realized that he hadn't activated this ability before because he simply hadn't possessed the ability. Concluding that it would not hinder him in the battle, Haruto decided to activate it. It was then that Haruto realized that the goblins were already in the forest. When he saw them, he quickly hid behind a tree. 3 goblins, probably scouts, had arrived. Haruto reminded himself to keep calm. He had defeated countless monsters in the past. The goblins, noticing Haruto peeking out from behind the tree, charged at him immediately. This would be his first fight in his second life. It was time to demonstrate his training. Concentrating his magic, Haruto thought about his daily efforts, resolving not to regret this moment. He was the village's only hope. Haruto unleashed a fire attack on the goblins. After killing a goblin, Haruto felt a surge of success, but he knew it wasn't enough. While he was facing the second goblin, another attacked him from behind. Haruto dodged him, realizing that he could not afford mistakes. After dispatching the 3 goblins, Haruto concluded that he needed to strengthen his attacks. He was lucky that he had not encountered stronger monsters yet. The moment Haruto took care of the goblins, the system showed a notification of his level life. Haruto felt a surge of satisfaction. I had defeated them and had gone up a level. The leveling up left Haruto feeling dizzy, almost drunk with power. But then he saw another goblin charging at him, sword in hand. The goblin managed to injure Haruto. Haruto wondered, was this really a new wave of goblins? While dealing with the immediate threat, Haruto looked behind him, only to find an entire horde. He had been caught completely off guard. With the injured arm, fighting against such an amount seemed impossible. A familiar despair seized him. Nothing had changed. No matter how much I fight, I can't change my destiny, Haruto thought. A memory of his beloved crossed his mind. But then, a fierce determination ignited. Haruto wouldn't give up. He wished he had tried harder. At that instant, his magic power shot up to level 50, granting him a new ability, Great Reaper. When Haruto saw the system window, announcing the level increase, he realized that he had acquired the creation skill. His true power, he understood, would manifest with higher levels. That's why I couldn't use it before, Haruto reflected. At that moment, a horde of goblins accumulated behind Haruto. He wondered if they felt his weaknesses, not his fighting prowess, as they approached to attack. What fate awaited him? A moment later, a goblin pounced on Haruto. He narrowly dodged his sword, realizing how close he was to being wounded, and unleashed a fireball. Haruto attacked the goblins, finding it significantly more difficult with his injured hand, as the relentless attack intensified. When a large group of 8 goblins attacked Haruto this time, he felt able to fight them off, trying to believe in his own strength. Haruto immediately activated his pit ability, using magic to make the goblins fall into the ravine. Had he really succeeded? It was a pit-making skill. Looking at his hands, Haruto rejoiced. A surge of hope told him that his fate could change now that he had saved the village. At that time, the system showed a significant level increase, probably due to the defeat of the goblins. He recalled hearing that an increase in level and the opportunity to advance often brought with it increasing pain. With that thought, Haruto lost consciousness. Then, Haruto opened his eyes. He realized that he was cold, and something was fluttering near his face. Suddenly, he saw a creature that quickly jumped away. What was that? A beautiful slime stood before him, revealing his head. Haruto saw a liquid, and wondered if he should drink it. After drinking the liquid from the slime's head, Haruto found it surprisingly beneficial. The slime continued to jump, catching Haruto's attention. What was this creature? Observing him, Haruto concluded that the slime was not a dangerous monster. In fact, he seemed friendly. The slime suddenly jumped into Naruto's face. He didn't understand what I wanted, and his touch was incredibly ticklish. Soon, Naruto found himself on the top of a mountain, contemplating his native village, a small and picturesque place nestled in nature. The slime looked ahead and indicated something, but Naruto stated that he would not return. I had a person to save, a path to follow, but I was still too weak. Perhaps everything was useless. About a mile away was Kinetagris, one of the best underground cities. His goal was to conquer their upper floors and raise their level as much as possible. Naruto then remembered his beloved and considered how he could level up. He remembered the appearance of the city, the obstacles and the battles that awaited him. Knowing that there were only 7 years left for that fateful day, as the slime crawled over him, Naruto stood up, mentally apologizing to his parents for his sudden departure. He wrote a letter explaining that he had a list of essential tasks that he needed to complete. Naruto felt that this was the end, but he needed to fix everything. Deeply grateful to his parents for their boundless love, he was glad to have grown up with them, remembering his father and mother. 8 years had passed and he was happy. Naruto thought with tears in his eyes, realizing that it was time to leave. After leaving his parents' house, the slime followed him. Naruto, unsure if he was really watching him, and considering him dangerous, told him that he would go alone. It would be difficult for her to defend herself from the monsters, but then the slime started clapping with its limbs. Since she seemed so worried, Naruto decided that she could stay nearby. Agreeing, Naruto and the slime continued their journey. A month later, after defeating a formidable wolf, Naruto decided it was time for lunch. The slime next to him was dragging something. Naruto realized that they were recent wounds from a new wolf, and thanked the slime. Then she placed a magic stone directly into Naruto's bag. With magic stones, you wouldn't have to worry about expenses. The slime then placed the stone. He then ran off, apparently shouting something. Naruto saw where to go. I had found the slime really a haven to spend the night. A moment later, Naruto peeked out from behind a mountain. The slime landed next to him. It was a cave, a perfect place to rest for the night before heading to Kinetagris tomorrow, having a barbecue. At the campfire, Naruto reflected that the low-ranked monsters here made finding food easy, even without fighting. Something he was used to. His body was finally starting to resemble his previous life form, fast-growing and peerless. A moment later, a system window materialized before Naruto, showing his level as 32. And his constantly increasing characteristics. He considered that he could level up more effectively within a dungeon to become stronger. Naruto sat on a stone, holding another one in his hand, and ate it going. He noticed that the slime that had climbed on top of him was also enjoying a kebab. Naruto then offered Ross, wondering if he would really devour everything. Smiling, Naruto considered that he could inspire the slime, and looked forward to collecting magic stones. I was delighted to have met him. Then Naruto asked if the slime was really a predator, a revelation that caused him a little surprise. Meanwhile, an invisible observer was watching Naruto from behind the mountain. Feeling the look, Naruto threw a barbecue skewer directly towards the hiding place. He registered a quick dodge. The next moment, Naruto realized that the entity was moving too fast to follow, and a quick subsequent attack hit him. I knew I wouldn't survive a flurry of punches at that speed. Looking straight ahead, Naruto saw a demon, not a person. A thief, he supposed, here for his magic stones. Moments later, the figure fell directly in front of Naruto. She snatched his kebabs from him, and, revealing herself to be a girl with both human and animal features, stood in front of him. Naruto looked at her, completely bewildered. Naruto watched the girl devour her barbecue and asked her if she was a monster. She replied that she was magical and a traveler, and then asked for her identity. Naruto introduced himself. Privately, he noticed that she did not look monstrous at all. In fact, he seemed quite friendly. The girl held his gaze. Naruto commented on her cute ears. He then revealed that he was from the squirrel tribe, asking if she had heard of them, only to immediately dismiss the question, saying she didn't care. Naruto simply looked at her with a questioning expression. Moments later, the girl disappeared from Aruto's sight, reappearing next to the bonfire where his food was cooking. He immediately asked Aruto if he minded if he finished it. Aruto, bewildered by his sudden movement, and where he had appeared, had not even heard a please. Meanwhile, the Slim was trying to snatch the shish kebab out of the girl's hands. The next morning, Aruto woke up and found the girl following him. The Slim was perched on his shoulder. Aruto asked why. She replied that Aruto was still a child, and that, since she had to go to the city, she was following him. Haruto then asked Magica if she wasn't a girl herself. The girl replied that even if one looked like an adult, one was still a child. Haruto insisted that he was already an adult, even though he planned to go alone. Suddenly, Haruto realized something, turning to Magic. He suggested that they should leave now so that the time would pass faster. Aruto smiled at the girl, and she accepted. Moments later, Aruto pointed forward, announcing that he had sighted Kenotagras. The landscape of the city appeared before them, framed by a massive wall. As they approached and passed through the door, a girl immediately approached them, touting low taxes and a clean record, inviting them in. Since ancient times, Kenotagras has meant chaos and a huge variety of races. This is due to the dungeon that stands in its center, attracting the city. People fascinated by his charm. When Aruto and Mjika entered the city, Mjika was visibly scared. Aruto asked her what was wrong, and she admitted that it was the first time she had experienced such a crowd of people. Turning to Magica, Aruto explained that he was from a village himself. She replied that she lived on the street. Aruto confessed that he got nervous the first time he arrived. Magica, surprised, pointed out that Aruto had said before that he had never been here. Aruto clarified that he had visited the city with his parents when he was about 10 years old. Recalling how he felt that the city was alive, and that almost nothing had changed since then. Aruto looked around, contemplating. He wondered if anything significant would happen in the next 2 years, knowing that caution was paramount. Magica then asked him where he was going. Haruto replied that he needed to visit the Adventurers Guild to earn money for his stay, and then asked Magica if she would accompany him. She accepted immediately. Upon arriving at the guild, Haruto declared his intention to change magic stones. However, the man at the counter turned to him and told Aruto that he was in the wrong place. Aruto looked surprised. The man then told Aruto to leave, stating that the guild was no place for children. Aruto then emptied his bag on the counter, revealing a pile of magic stones. The man who had just tried to dispatch him looked on in disbelief, asking where he had gotten so many Aruto. Aruto simply replied that he had obtained them by hunting. This girl next to me, whom I defeated, doesn't know how to sell magic stones, Aruto stated, pointing to Mjika. The man looked at Magica with surprise. She started to protest, about to say that she had nothing, but Aruto interrupted her, telling her to be quiet. Smiling, Aruto realized that the total value amounted to approximately 19.90 units. The man then informed Aruto the exact sum, 2 gold, 29 silver, and 85 copper. Aruto reflected that for such a sum, he felt completely exhausted. He wondered if his exhaustion was simply due to his young age, or was it a consequence of his rapid growth. While Aruto was putting the money in his bag, he asked if he could register as a seeker. The man asked him why a boy wanted to register as an adventurer. Aruto pointed at Magica, stating that she was an adult, and added that he personally needed to register because of an important company. Magica started to speak again, but Aruto covered her mouth quickly, urging the man to hurry up because they had little time. After leaving the guild, Magica turned to Aruto, telling him to take her with him and use her. Aruto, asking for clarification, apologized. She explained that at her age, it was difficult to articulate everything clearly, so she simply asked for help. He then asked Magica if it wasn't wise to spend time getting magic stones, to which she replied that it wouldn't improve her reputation. Magica, walking behind Aruto, heard him dismiss the idea of reputation. No one gets stronger simply by increasing their reputation, he said. Magica looked at Aruto, clearly surprised by his words. Aruto walked in front of Magica, saying that now that they had money, they should look for a hotel. He proposed to share a meal to thank her for her help, but also offered to separate there if she had other plans. Magica agreed to go with him, but not without a condition, either money or they would spend time in his room. Upon hearing this, Aruto simply told him to follow him. What a woman she was, Aruto reflected to himself. In the late afternoon, Aruto expressed his genuine pleasure that Magica had joined him, admitting that at first he expected her to refuse. Sitting in his room, they talked. He explained that his unkempt appearance often closed off many opportunities for him, including access to the delicious food available at this hotel. I thought Magica would enjoy it too. While Aruto was explaining something to him in his room, Magica was staring at him, and Aruto couldn't understand why. Magica then ignored his unasked question, declaring that she would take a bath. Aruto, seeing that she was starting to take off her cape, quickly asked her to undress in the bathroom, not in front of him. At that moment, the slime happily settled into bed, clearly tired. Magica, standing in the bathroom, was getting ready to get dressed, noting that this was a new experience for her. Getting out of the shower, she decided that she would go straight to bed and enjoy a hearty meal the next morning. Then, he noticed Aruto practicing magic, realizing the immense mana radiating from him. This lasagna was impossible for an ordinary person. Watching him sitting on the bed with his eyes closed, Magica reflected on who Aruto really was. He had traveled the world tirelessly, looking for someone specific. However, a few days ago, this guy had conveniently joined her. As she watched him, she saw a strength beyond her years and abilities that she had never encountered. He needed to get closer to investigate further. He seemed to be harboring a secret. Magica remembered everything Aruto had said, surprised by his mature behavior and speech. Could he be the one I was looking for? The one destined to change this world? The prediction of the stars predicted that the hero would arrive in the body of a girl, making it impossible for Aruto to be that hero. Even so, while contemplating it, Magica felt an undeniable premonition. Aruto would become the key to open the doors of a new world, a feeling that she had already experienced. The next moment, Aruto was fast asleep, completely exhausted from his training. Magica, watching him, noticed how he collapsed like a dead man once his mana reserves were depleted. Why do you try so hard with training? She wondered, with a sense of unease growing inside her. It almost seemed as if someone was chasing him. Someone was watching them from the roof. A moment later, an intruder tried to enter through the open window. Magica was surprised, wondering if he really was a thief. His presence was barely detectable, suggesting a very low level. I could have chased him away, but I wanted to observe how Aruto would handle the situation. So Magica pretended to be asleep. When the thief entered the room, he approached Aruto. Aruto, moving, looked for something behind him, then woke up and calmly greeted the intruder in front of him. The robber responded by pulling out a knife and trying to attack Aruto. Magica immediately jumped out of bed, yelling at Aruto to be careful. The knife stopped inches from Aruto's throat as the thief warned, "Don't move." The thief then said that if Aruto behaved like an adult, they wouldn't hurt him. Both Magica and Aruto demanded to know what the thief wanted. "Did you really want money? How did you know about this place?" Aruto insisted, leaving the thief speechless. Instead of talking, Aruto attacked the thief. He launched an air cannon, hitting the intruder. The force of Aruto's blow sent the intruder out the window. Magica looked at Aruto and asked if he was okay. He replied that everything was in perfect order. Seeing where the enemy fell, Magica realized that Aruto had used an incredibly complex magic with a seemingly simple movement. Such a power could easily kill. Magica wondered how much she must have trained Aruto to reach such a level at her age. She turned to Aruto to ask him, but he was already fast asleep again. Magica thought that this boy was destined for fame in many ways. He noticed that the thief's knife was lying near Aruto's bed. Later, after waking up, the two went down to the tavern and began to eat. While several dishes were being brought to them, Aruto asked Magica if she thought the food was delicious and if she was enjoying it. With her mouth full, Magica declared that it was the most delicious meal she had ever tasted. His words sounded a little confused. Aruto simply told him to eat and not to hurry. Soon after, they thanked the staff for the food. Then they left the hotel, and Magica thanked Aruto, saying that she was completely full. Aruto then jokingly promised Magica that by morning he would have eaten enough for 10 people. Magica then asked for her next move. Aruto explained that although he initially planned to visit the dungeon, yesterday's unexpected visitor had made him change his mind. He was holding the burglar's knife now, contemplating where else to look. Aruto addressed the guild, greeting those who were sitting near the entrance. Again, 2 men were watching him. One, the merchant who had bought Aruto's magic stones, recognized him, asking if he really was the young man from yesterday. Aruto, in response, asked, "Are you appraising magic stones today?" The man explained that he was talking to the boss, and asked Aruto to come back later if he had any business. Aruto replied that it was a lucky moment. He also wished to speak to his superiors, and added, "Could it be that there is a thief in the guild?" The boss, looking at Aruto, asked for clarification and more details. Aruto explained that a suspicious individual had entered his room the day before. Although they managed to scare him away, the intruder's target was clearly the money from the magic stones sold to the guild. The criminal had not disturbed the room. He knew precisely where the funds were kept. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known to look in Aruto's bag. In other words, Aruto concluded, the thief could only be someone present in the guild during our transaction. Finishing his explanation, Aruto looked at his superiors. The boss recognized the high probability of Aruto's deduction. Turning to Lion, who was sitting right in front of him, the boss declared that Lion was the one responsible, and asked if he had noticed anyone suspicious. Lion replied vaguely, "I wouldn't even know. Maybe, maybe not." The boss pressured him to speak more clearly. Aruto silently watched the exchange. Finally, Lion reported that he had not seen anyone suspicious. Aruto, pointing to Magica, revealed that she had, in fact, managed to mark the criminal during their encounter. Magica seemed surprised by Aruto's words. Aruto then requested that if the boss noticed a man with a magic mark on his hand, he should stop him. At that moment, Lion subtly rolled down his sleeves. Handing the dagger to the boss, Aruto mentioned that the thief had also dropped it. Although it is an excellent weapon, it should be handed over to the gendarmes as proof. True, it will help them in the search for a thief, the chief replied, examining the dagger. Suddenly, Lion interrupted, asking the boss if Aruto could keep the dagger. He argued that the rules allowed the victors to claim that of the defeated opponents, and it seemed a pity to part with such a good weapon. The boss started to agree, but before he could finish, Lion had already approached Aruto. He put the dagger in Aruto's hand, praising its quality, and urging him to keep it carefully. Speculating that it was quite valuable, Aruto tried to push Lion away, clearly disgusted by the turn of events. The boss then insisted on calm transactions, emphasizing the need to strengthen security. Lion, claiming to understand everything, asked the boss to trust him. Then, Aruto and Magica left. Magica then claimed that this person was a thief, and asked, was it wise to let him go? Aruto replied that the warnings had been given. The rest is no longer our business. Magica then asked. Her real goal was just to get a weapon. Aruto looked at Magica with a flash of confusion. Had she seen through him? He decided that with this task completed, his adventures would truly begin. Standing at the entrance of the dungeon, Aruto contemplated its imposing structure as he spoke. Magica, following his gaze, admitted that she could not make out its peak. Aruto explained that this was a legendary labyrinth, one of the largest dungeons in the world, whose vastness, origin and builders remained a mystery. Upon entering the portal, they found themselves instantly transported to a different place. Aruto clarified that the lower level spanned from the first floor to the 25th. This section was relatively safe, and served mainly as a training ground for novice adventurers. While Aruto was explaining this, a distinctive bellow caught his attention. Suddenly, two nearby adventurers noticed that a monster had escaped from an upper floor. They shouted that their magic would not be enough, urging Aruto to flee. Just at that moment, a gigantic horned rat charged directly at Aruto. Others, seeing a simple child, frantically shouted at him to run faster. Naruto, facing the charging enemy, pronounced the word grave. Instantly, the creature collapsed into a huge hole that appeared on the ground. Naruto realized that he had miscalculated. He had used too much power and risked harming those around him. Magica looked amazed, along with everyone else who couldn't comprehend the sudden appearance of such a massive hole. Although some suspected an earthquake, no tremors were felt. Naruto quickly claimed that the floor had simply collapsed, apparently due to bad luck. The abyss was so deep that he shouted to everyone to be careful while scattering. Magica asked, "Why didn't you say it was your work?" Naruto replied that they wouldn't have believed him anyway. It was better to hurry to the upper floors. Starting from the 26th floor, the dungeon reached an intermediate difficulty level where the real maze was said to begin. Moments later, Magica was confronted by a bear. Naruto watched, impressed, as he defeated him with a single blow. Sitting next to the corpse, Magica downplayed the compliment, pointing out that Naruto had also struggled. Pulling the blade out of his belt, Naruto decided it was time to try it out. The system immediately reported an increase in skill, dexterity plus 110. Naruto was excited about the increase, realizing that the dagger was much more effective than he had imagined. He reflected that a proper skill board would show him his progress visually instead of just feeling it, and that this knife would be invaluable when choosing new equipment. Even with such a powerful weapon, Naruto knew he couldn't afford to stop. He needed to get stronger by facing the bears in front of him. The monsters at this intermediate level weren't particularly challenging, so he resolved to look for more formidable enemies on the way out. Naruto declared that the upper level was his next destination, and after dispatching his current opponents, they departed. Magica simply watched the bears that Naruto had killed. Naruto ventured into a cave, immediately plunging into the battle. The demons rushed upon him. Naruto was confident that he could repel them. Soon, the demons were crushed under the very stones that Naruto had used as a weapon. Seeing them fall, he let out a sigh of relief. "We're on the 50th floor," Naruto announced to Magica. "This is where the upper level begins. A high-risk area where only a few high-level adventurers can expect to compete. The strength of the monsters will increase with each floor, so we need to level up significantly. As long as we're still here." He looked straight ahead as he spoke. Magica simply observed Naruto, and then turned to ask him why he was fighting monsters in such a common way. Naruto was completely surprised. There was an unusual way. If she knew a better method, she eagerly asked him to teach her, her eyes shining. Magica clarified that she didn't mean it in that sense, but that the monsters Naruto had just defeated were strong enough to annoy even high-level adventurers. Magica disliked the ease with which Naruto had dispatched several monsters at once. I couldn't understand how he possessed such strength. Standing in front of him, she pressed him for answers. Naruto then countered by asking if he found his fighting style strange. Magica confirmed that it certainly looked that way from a stranger's perspective, wondering why he seemed so surprised by her observation. At that moment, Naruto realized that Magica was the second person who really perceived him. Before this, only Hana had seen beyond its surface. He remembered his past life. Even at level 99, he was fighting monsters by himself, while other high-level adventurers were attracting followers. No one had even taken a look at him, discarded due to his low life statistics. This was the harsh law of that world. Now, Naruto reflected. It seemed that there were others besides Hana who were defying this very law. At that moment, Magica's curiosity piqued, and she asked if Naruto was, in fact, fully human. Smiling, Naruto assured him that he was 100% exactly human. He thought to himself that, despite his statement, it was a difficult truth to accept, given that he had died and been reborn. Observing Naruto and repeating his words, magical, amused by his smile, she settled for the explanation that he was simply peculiar. Naruto got irritated with his comment. Moments later, the system announced a level rise, and they continued their descent into the cave. Naruto declared that he could now defeat the monsters on the 50th floor, and proposed that they go up a little higher. The memories of Aruto's past life told him that a dangerous monster would be lurking here. As if on cue, a small ogre appeared before them. Aruto remembered how much effort it took him to defeat this ogre in his past life, now curious to know how quickly he could do it. While they were in front of the monster, Magica commented on the ogre's impatient eagerness to kill, noting his vastly superior strength compared to the previous monsters. Turning to Aruto, he offered to attack from the rear. Aruto refused, declaring that he would fight the monster alone. Magica, hearing this, became worried that Aruto was not thinking clearly. A single mistake would mean his death. Aruto replied that he understood the risks, but that he saw this as an opportunity to measure his true strength. Putting down his knife, he took a step forward to confront the ogre. The next moment, Haruto attacked, striking the ogre with his sword. He discovered that the monster's skin was amazingly thick like metal, but he still managed to wound it. The ogre, enraged, retaliated, slashing Aruto's cheek. Dodging a subsequent blow, Aruto reasoned that his attacks were really effective. By continuously dodging and hitting the same spot as he had been doing, he could finally defeat the ogre. But as he landed after another blow, Magica exclaimed, "That can't be it." Magica, however, couldn't help but wonder if Aruto had really defeated this monster so easily. Aruto, having dried himself, reflected that he had not needed to exert himself much. Perhaps this was the current limit of his strength. The slime then deposited a large diamond at his feet. As Aruto examined it, he wondered why a monster of this rank would drop such an important gem. A sudden change in the air signaled something new. At that moment, Aruto called Magica, asking her if she had heard him. The girl right behind him responded by asking what sound he was referring to. Realizing the danger, Haruto turned to Magica and urged her, "We have to get out of here fast." Magica replied that escape was impossible. To move even an inch would mean his death. Just then, a colossal ogre emerged directly from the depths of the cave, its massive hand reaching out towards them. This green ogre was shrouded in magic ivy, a low-level parasitic monster, known for draining the power of higher-level creatures they infect. Aruto, in front of the ogre, reflected on his presence on the 70th floor. The typical ogres were only starting to appear 10 floors up. Aruto wasn't even completely sure he could defeat a smaller opponent. And yet, now, a massive ogre was in front of him. As he put the slime back in the bag, he looked at Magica, insisting that they take the opportunity to escape. Magica, however, flatly refused. He recognized the immense power of the monster, but he believed that it had a limit. Activating his gloves, he prepared for battle. She had trained tirelessly to become a companion worthy of the hero she had sought, having long considered herself peerless. However, upon meeting Aruto, he finally understood that his past efforts were insufficient. The girl then charged the ogre, determined in her duty to secure the victory, and launched her attack. After her blow, Magica saw that her attack had barely taken effect. The ogre only got angrier and retaliated against her. Dodging the ogre's blows, Magica realized that she was faster than him. A single attack would clearly be insufficient. I needed to untie several simultaneously. Despite his swift and relentless attacks, the ogre hit her with ivy and then grabbed her, his grip painfully crushing her body. Aruto used an air blade, freeing the girl, as the ivy fell behind her. Aruto asked Magica how she was feeling. She thanked him, with a feeling of self-reproach that invaded her for having been saved by a child. Magica turned her gaze to the ogre, reactivating his power. I knew it was time to unleash it all. Summoning the light as an intact shadow, he called the radiance of 1,000 heavenly bodies, unleashing the artifact. Rain of stars, Magic attacked the ogre with all his might. Realizing that he had spent all his mana on the secret spell, he believed that the ogre should have perished. But when the dust dispersed, she saw the ogre standing and staring, completely bewildered. The ogre at that moment was lifting his leg directly over Magic. Magica looked at him, realizing that despite putting all her strength into the blow, it hadn't been enough. The ogre collapsed on the ground directly below him. Aruto quickly moved towards Magica. When she saw Aruto appear before her, He took her in his arms, telling her to leave the rest to him while he ran. She then turned to the slime, instructing him to take care of Magica. The slime felt, and Naruto rejoined the battle. Standing before the ogre, Naruto knew he had to win. Naruto immediately rushed forward, knowing that he was no faster than magic, but considering it anyway. The ogre's attack abruptly broke Naruto's train of thought. Upon witnessing this, Magica let out a desperate scream. Gasping for air, Naruto instinctively countered the achievement blow with the aim of retaliating. Naruto examined his enemy, recognizing that despite its magical nature, Ivy was still vulnerable to fire. However, he knew that simply burning the vines would be useless. They would only regenerate. Naruto needed to attack in a way that would really hurt the ogre. Grasping his sword, Naruto launched another assault. He understood that directly piercing the ogre's thick skin was impossible, so he had to target a precise weakness. With his goal in mind, Naruto unleashed a fireball directly at the ogre's back. Naruto collapsed on the ground, watching the impact of his attack. The next moment, Naruto's eyes darkened, and he fell to the ground. Magica could only look at the ogre in shock, amazed to realize that Naruto had won. But Naruto was only a child, and yet he had defeated this ogre. These were Magica's last thoughts before she fell unconscious. Upon opening their eyes, Naruto and Magica found a slime floating directly above them. The sun was shining as they lay on the ground, wondering how they got there. Naruto asked if Ru, the slime, had really rescued them, to which Ru affirmed it with a unique tongue sound. Hugging the slime, Naruto thanked her, calling her the most reliable companion in the world. Turning to Magica, Naruto pointed out the danger of remaining unconscious there. It was fortunate that they had recovered where they were. Magica remained silent, then apologized, and declared that she would return to the hotel first. Naruto agreed, saying that he too would take a break before returning. Naruto looked at Magica, very surprised. Could magic really use an artifact? The artifacts were sacred tools created by God. Their number was so few in his world that they could be counted on the fingers of one hand. The artifact that Magica used was called Star Shower. Naruto remembered that, if his memories of his past life did not fail him, the owner of this artifact would die in 7 years. It was night. Naruto, sitting in the bathtub, realized that Magica had possessed the magic of an artifact all this time. The artifact known as the Hand of Justice designated its wearer as a person possessing 2 specific traits, classified by the Vatican as a criminal element. At number 5, Machia Tentera. She and 5 others were declared enemies of God. Although this declaration had not yet taken place, an order for its destruction would be given in the future. Naruto requested the skill marker, and a system interface appeared before him. Looking at him, Naruto guessed that Magica's life indicator was probably 4. In the dungeon, Naruto had felt her magical energy overcome his, along with an indestructible barrier. She must be incomparably stronger than him, Naruto reflected, a clear disparity in their respective standards of living. Naruto thought then, but even she will be ruined by the Vatican in 7 years. As he sank under the water, Naruto began to understand the extent of his weakness compared to her. Could he really change his destiny? Naruto asked himself sadly. At that moment, the Slim appeared to Naruto, who, surprised, came out of his bathroom. He asked her what she was already doing there, wondering if she wanted a bath too. The Slam replied in his own language, prompting Naruto to come out and start washing her. Naruto, rubbing Ru with a washcloth, commented, "This time, we only escape thanks to you." He promised to rub it until it glowed, a gesture that delighted the slime. While Naruto was rubbing the slime, she replied in her unique language. Naruto didn't know if he should stop, as the slime's heels seemed to be tickling, a disconcerting thought, as he never imagined a slime to have heels. The next moment, the slime was glowing so brightly that it almost blinded him, prompting Naruto to ask if she always looked like this when she was clean. Smiling, Naruto looked at Ru and asked if he was happy. Ru jumped with happiness and said something to Naruto. The next moment, it blurred out looking like a puddle. Seeing this, Naruto asked if she shouldn't be washed, and then gently pushed the slime back into the water. After getting out of the mana pool and taking the slime back to his room, Aruto realized that she had scared him. Just then, Magic appeared. Getting up from the sofa, he greeted, "Hello, Aruto." Magica seemed to have something to say, so Aruto decided that they should talk outside. As Aruto was bringing him a drink, he realized that he hadn't uttered a word since they returned to the hotel. Had something really happened? Giving him the drink, Aruto commented, "The sunset here is beautiful." They both looked at the sky. Magica nodded in silence. Clutching his cup, he sat down solemnly before turning to Aruto. He confessed, "I always thought I would never lose to a magician." She had been so sure that no one could match her skill. "Maybe my training made me too arrogant," he admitted, "but now I realize that I was weak. From now on, I want to devote myself to solitary training," Magica declared, looking at Aruto. Magica explained that living next to Aruto would only aggravate her weakness, so she wanted a separate room. Looking at Aruto, he added, "If I hadn't come with you, I would have never noticed this," and then thanked him. He swore, "Next time, I will definitely not lose to you." Turning to Aruto once more, she challenged him, "In our next meeting, I will try to become stronger than you." Upon hearing this, Aruto's hands trembled, and he started laughing, puzzling Magica as to why he found it so funny. Aruto explained that he was saying very strange things. Then he apologized, realizing that it was not about talent. It was just the most important thing was to put in the effort. Clashing the cups, Aruto declared that he was not going to lose either, and that they should meet again. When each of them had become 100 times stronger, they laughed, rejoicing at their current progress, not imagining that despite their efforts, there was a power in this world that could destroy them in the blink of an eye. Back at the hotel, Aruto started to collect his belongings. Checking his bag, he confirmed that he had packed everything. She looked at the bed where Magic had slept, and then closed her eyes. As he left the room, he resolved to keep the promise he made to her. From that moment on, he lost all track of time, completely giving himself over to training. First, Haruto decided that he needed to develop his creation skill. Consulting his system, he arrived at a forest, realizing that it was an ideal training place. He boasted an abundance of collectible crystals and was rich in mana. A skill of creation, Haruto reflected. He started training by generating mana and breaking stones into pieces. Soon, he received a skill boost and gained control over magic. He dedicated himself to mining stones. Soon after, his creation skill reached level 20, unlocking blacksmithing. As Aruto anticipated, the creation provided not only offensive abilities such as Tomb Blinder, but also the power to create objects. Using dungeon materials like fire and magic, naturally, he no longer had to worry about getting kicked out of the forge. Holding a sword before him, Aruto realized that by training solely with it, he had suddenly acquired a new skill. Moments later, while fighting a powerful monster in a cave, Aruto realized that it was too early to advance to the next floor. Shortly after, the system reported that Aruto had acquired the sword art skill and passed level 40. A new skill, two-handed style, was unlocked. Seeing this, Haruto untied his sword and brandished it at his opponent. After the battle, his level immediately increased. Haruto noticed that when using Tomb Blinder, Typhoon and other attacks, the level of the Tomb Blinder would go up. He combined it with magic, gaining not only control over the created fissures, but also a high lethal potential. During this period, Aruto's level increased along with his abilities. The system reported that Aruto's level was now 40, and all of his abilities had increased by 30 units. His creation and manipulation skill were now available. Intrigued, Haruto opened the system window. He described manipulation as absorbing a portion of mana to move an object in the desired direction. Haruto pointed his hand towards a stone and activated the manipulation. The stone moved to one side, although not as conspicuously as the Tomb Blinder. Haruto believed that this skill would also prove useful. He continued to develop the skill. Thus, the days turned into weeks. Soon, winter came. Walking through the city, Haruto listened to people's conversations. He heard something entertaining. Two men were discussing a rumor. "Have you heard about the weirdo that recently appeared on the upper floors of the dungeon? He defeated 1,000 monsters by himself. The second man admitted that he had heard the stories and added that the weirdo was just a child. And for some reason, I carried a low-level slime everywhere. As Naruto walked past them, he realized that they were talking about him. When they saw him, they couldn't believe their eyes. After all, high-level adventurers usually hunt on the upper floors in groups. Naruto watched them in silence, realizing that his presence was finally being noticed. Before, his low profile meant he went unnoticed, no matter what he achieved, but maybe something had changed. Although he certainly didn't like being called a weirdo, Naruto mused, looking at the strangers. Later, at the hotel, Naruto informed the owner that he would return to the dungeon tomorrow, and wished to vacate his room for 2 or 3 days. The owner warned Naruto to be careful, and then casually asked if the girl who was with him before was okay. Hearing the question, Naruto realized that he hadn't seen Magica since they rented separate rooms. The owner then mentioned that the girl had not returned for several days, which was beginning to worry her. Hearing this, Naruto grabbed his jacket, initially thinking, it's magic. There's nothing to worry about, but a twinge of discomfort still ran through him. Just at that moment, a knight on horseback entered the city. Everyone who saw him commented that the Vatican had summoned their knight, finding him quite impressive. Naruto heard this, shot out of the hotel, and the owner yelled at him, asking what was wrong. Naruto didn't answer, his mind racing thinking about how the future he remembered now was at odds with reality. Then he understood that everything was fine. His changes had also affected Magica. But why hadn't I considered that? Naruto's thoughts were swirling. The Vatican had already ordered the destruction of Magica. Magical, and if the future in which she was executed came now, Naruto could only think and pray that Magical would be okay. As he was running past a carriage, someone inside was watching Naruto from the window, thinking, what a clever boy he is. Approaching the dungeon, Naruto desperately hoped that Magica would be safe. She activated her sense of presence, reasoning that someone as powerful as her should be easy to locate, and prayed that she wasn't mistaken. Seeing a familiar figure, he called her. Magica turned around, recognizing Naruto immediately. It's been a long time, she commented. How are you doing? Acknowledging his strength and concluding that his concerns were probably unfounded. Catching his breath, Naruto assured her that he was fine, prompting Magica to ask him why he was breathing so heavily. Unable to admit his fears for his safety, Naruto pretended to be casually jogging. He claimed he had just been out for a run, saw her and stopped to say hello before pretending to carry on. Then, taking off her scarf, she commented on how cold it was, especially for her outfit. He wrapped the scarf around her, urging her to wear it so she wouldn't catch a cold. Magica accepted gratefully. Just at that moment, something in the sky attracted his gaze. They both looked up, puzzled by the sight. Naruto described it as a black mass, and Magica admitted that it made her feel deeply uneasy. The luminous mass began to expand, its oppressive aura was palpable. Naruto instantly recognized the imminent danger and urged Magica to evacuate the nearby citizens. Moments later, the black mass began to crack. Naruto closed his eyes in disbelief. He was a demon standing right in front of them, a creature known for controlling high-ranking monsters. He wondered why he would appear in the heart of the city. The demon immediately began to devastate nearby houses. He was a creature that would not stop attacking until everything around him was reduced to ashes. Nothing would stop him. However, Naruto found himself paralyzed, just as he had been during the fire. The insurmountable difference in their living standards numbed his body, his will powerless before the inexorable laws of this world. Despite this, Naruto forced his limbs, desperate to move, knowing that it can't be done, that the city would be annihilated if it remained motionless. Suddenly, Magica returned the scarf that Naruto had given her. Everything will be fine, she declared. Naruto, you can trust me. Jumping into action, he charged directly at the demon. Naruto watched intently, impressed by Magica's incredible strength. She had become much more powerful. While attacking the demon, he managed to land a blow, but it regenerated instantly. Magica realized that, being a demon, it would require a single overwhelming blow. She prepared to use her artifact, Starfall, but the demon moved with blinding speed, appearing behind her in an instant. Magica turned, recognizing his quickness, and dodged his next attack. He realized that the demon did not leave any opening for him to use the artifact. A moment later, Aruto saw only shattered pavement, his thoughts consumed by magic. He couldn't understand why he was a mere spectator, because his last 8 years had been so completely wasted. He had not been reborn, only to witness another catastrophe, a repetition of the collapse of his past life. His pure desire ignited the mana in his hands. Looking at the glowing energy, Haruto wondered if he could manifest magic from his current paralyzed state. If only he could succeed. He looked towards Magica. The demon intensified its attack, and she was struggling with the added difficulty of the strong winds. One direct hit, and he would die, he knew that. With the demon regenerating after every hit, he needed to seize the perfect moment to take off his artifact. Magica attacked the demon once more, only to be violently thrown back. This was just unreal, she thought. Even if Aruto was accumulating mana now, he wouldn't be able to intervene in time. The demon conjured up a huge fireball, making it spin over his head. Magica looked at her, understanding that her death was imminent. He closed his eyes, preparing for the end. At that moment, Haruto used his manipulation skill. Magica opened her eyes to see the demon's fire attack being carried away. Haruto looked at the redirected attack, incredulous. Magica wondered if she had really altered the trajectory of the attack. Just then, the demon lost his balance. Magica looked at Haruto, realizing that he was a young man. When the demon fell right on Magica, she saw her opportunity to attack. Haruto shouted at him, "Use Rain of Stars." He attacked the demon, wounding him until he disappeared. Upon witnessing his disappearance, Haruto and Magica believed that they had succeeded. Magica ran to Haruto asking if he was okay. Helping him up, Haruto explained that he was only weak from the level up, and that a short break would restore his strength. While she was putting Haruto on her back, he didn't understand what Magica was doing. She insisted on taking him to the hotel. Haruto asked her not to do it, but she replied that he had already done a lot for her, and begged him to allow her to do at least this. Later, as they were fleeing, Magica mentioned that she had never seen a technique like hers before. Realizing that Magica was referring to his manipulation ability, Haruto explained that he had acquired it since their last encounter. She proved it by manipulating her scarf, making it instantly appear over magical. Magica, seeing this, asked if he had done that. Haruto replied that he could move objects at will using mana. Thus, he could change the direction of wind attacks, block and redirect offensives, and with training, one could control opponents like puppets. Magica stated that it was an amazing skill. Haruto, however, explained that he could not move while using it, and that he would never have defeated the demon alone. He then credited Magica for saving the city, addressing her directly. Blushing, Magica said she thought they both tried. Haruto laughed in response. A thought struck Haruto as he remembered the demon's last defeat. If these incidents continued, the city would be annihilated. He realized that he did not remember hearing about such an event before, which meant that someone must have defeated him. Who could be strong enough to defeat such a demon? Haruto reflected. Just then, he felt an aura, and asked Magica to stop, while they were running along the roof. Magica, turning to Haruto, said that they hadn't reached their destination yet, but Haruto insisted that they stop now. Suddenly, Magica stopped, stopping in her tracks on the roof. Haruto looked down, and immediately recognized the figure, his black clothes, the oppressive mana that radiated from him, as if he were not of this world. This was the wizard who had killed Hana in a previous life. The man standing directly in front of Haruto was Gamagan, who was standing there looking away. Magica looked at Haruto, noticing that he seemed disturbed. A look I've never seen before. She asked who the man was. Haruto replied that he was Gamagan Solsu, one of the 12 commanders of Epponia. Hearing this, Magica thought that even she had heard about him, as Gamagan was known as the strongest magician in the world. While she was pondering over this, Haruto started to gather his magic, which prompted Magica to ask what he was doing. In a fit of rage, Naruto stated that it was none of her business, as she had to kill this wizard. Magica stopped Naruto by asking him if he really intended to fight in that state. Naruto was already looking at Magica, who grabbed him by the hand and told him that he was too weak after his level up, and that he would be no match for this wizard. Naruto just asked him to let go. Magica, in turn, urged Naruto to calm down and sit down. I didn't understand. I couldn't win now, she screamed, trying to make him come to his senses. Naruto calmed down, realizing that Magica was right. In his current state, he couldn't defeat the wizard. Leaning on the roof, Naruto felt a wave of depression. Meanwhile, the magician was watching his invention. A man next to him then asked him what it meant that he had summoned the demon, and if he, Mr. Gamagan, was really responsible. Gamagan replied that it was true. He had acquired a rare summoning artifact and simply wanted to try it out, but it turned out to be useless. The artifact could only summon a low-ranked ogre. Breaking the artifact in his hands, he stated. Unfortunately, before he had a chance to intervene, someone had already defeated him without difficulty. The man behind the magician pointed out that the strength of such a weak demon was enough to destroy a small state. The 12 commanders of Aponia obey only royal orders. Their duty is to protect the country. Such an act is simply unacceptable. At this moment, Tamagan looked at the man, picked him up, and tied his neck with magic. Gamaga asked the suspended man why he felt the need to express his opinions on such matters. Surely, he hadn't considered that it might be better for him to keep his opinions to himself. Gasping for air, the man apologized profusely. The young man collapsed to the ground. The magician then ordered his carriage, declaring his intention to return to the capital and continue his research. At that moment, a subordinate turned to Gamagan, asking him if he had not yet found the one he was looking for, and if he really intended to leave things as they were. Gamagan replied that the person was not in the city. As he entered his carriage, he reflected that when he saw Naruto and Magica, he believed that Maka would unleash terror. I did not expect to find one of the enemies of the Vatican in such a place. Naruto and Magica were horrified by the man's gaze. The magician, meanwhile, speculated that Marquis must have been the one who defeated the demon, considering her strong. He imagined himself acquiring wonderful ingredients from his body parts. Gamagan considered what he could do with the girl then, but stopped his thoughts, realizing that no orders had been given for her destruction yet. Going against the king would jeopardize the support for his experiments, a risk too great to take. I'm the magician. So he instructed his coachman to leave, sure that they would find the girl again. As the magician's carriage was leaving, Naruto and Magica watched him leave, realizing how deeply the magician's gaze had disturbed them. Magica expressed her fear that she would blindly kill them. Then he remembered that he was a commander of Aponia, and, looking at Naruto, asked him how he was. Naruto stared at the ground, reflecting on his own stupidity for having believed that he could fight such a monstrous wizard. Swearing to himself, he resolved to be stronger than Gamagan the next time they met. A few days later, the Lord of Kenatagras expressed his desire to publicly thank Magica for having exorcised the demon. Magica refused, however, asking if they had forgotten about Naruto. The officers, however, were unwilling to acknowledge that someone of Naruto's low social standing could possess such power. After that, the Lord seemed to give up. As they were walking through the city, Naruto asked Magica if she really didn't want the recognition. Were you sure? They discussed this. Magica, sure of her position, expressed her frustration because no one wanted to recognize Naruto's power. Naruto replied that nothing could be done. As in his world, everything was decided by a standard of living. Smiling and looking at Magica, she silently reflected that only she and Hana seemed to ignore this social rule. Then he advised Magica that, instead of worrying, she should devote herself to training. Magica, hearing Naruto speak with such conviction, wondered if everything was really okay with him. Naruto mentioned that he was thinking about going back to the dungeon tomorrow. At that moment, they passed by a man who was watching them intently. Naruto stopped and turned to him. Magica asked him what had caught his attention. He replied that the man's face looked familiar to him. Naruto saw the same man who worked at the guild, now sitting on the asphalt. A Roland, holding a sign that said warmth and affection is needed. Lion, upon seeing Naruto, an employee of the guild, was surprised and recognized him immediately. He shouted, "Is that you? Don't you remember me?" Aruto, clearly showing his dislike for Lion, claimed that he had never seen him before. Lion, of course, did not believe Aruto, saying that his face was unforgettable. He explained his terrible situation, hinting that financial support would be greatly appreciated. Aruto and Magica just passed by. Aruto, turning to Magica, asked her on which floor of the Masmora she was training, deliberately ignoring Lion. Suddenly, Lion threw himself at Aruto's feet, begging for money. Exasperated, Aruto tried to shake him off, asking him why he was so persistent, and if he wasn't ashamed to ask strangers for money. Undeterred, Lion turned to Aruto and Magica, declaring his faith in Aruto's potential. Both of them. They remained silent, just staring at him. Lion, pointing to himself, proposed that they should form a party of adventurers. He offered a fresh start, formally introducing himself as Lion to Aruto and Magica. As an adventurer that he was, he proposed that they work together. Together. Another pair of hands always comes in handy in battle. Besides, he added, asking them not to be surprised, "I'm a hero. It's a super weird profession." Aruto, with a slight smile, told Lion that he did not agree with the proposal. Lion couldn't understand Aruto's objection. Aruto reflected that although being a hero was rare, he doubted Lion would be useful. Magica yawned behind Aruto as Lion, still on his knees, begged her to reconsider. "I even left the guild specifically because of this," Lion said. Aruto, hearing this, replied, "Most likely they would catch you red-handed and throw you out." Lion gasped, unable to comprehend how Aruto had caught him so easily, and then realized that he had definitely messed up. Aruto sighed, explaining that that was precisely the reason why he preferred to win. Money hunting in the Masmoras. Suddenly, Lion was practically jumping on Aruto, begging again to be accepted into his group. Magica finally lost her patience. He gave Lion half a loaf and told him he was pissing everyone off. Lion let himself fall to the ground, collapsing firm behind them as Aruto and Magica walked away, chatting in a low voice. Magica informed Aruto that she was hungry. Aruto replied that he had discovered a good place recently and offered to take her there. A few days later, in the depths of a dungeon, Aruto was fighting numerous enemies. After defeating them, his level increased to 42, and his passive sword skill increased to 43. He observed that the sword he had forged was turning out to be exceptionally good. Even after several more days, Lion had not stopped chasing Aruto. Aruto, however, was already considering moving up to a higher floor. Suddenly, Aruto heard frantic screams and the sound of someone running. Lion suddenly appeared, chased by a pack of wolves, screaming for help. Aruto was completely surprised to see Lion there. Lion immediately begged Aruto to get rid of the wolves that were chasing him. Aruto then used his magic, telling Lion to duck before unleashing a burst of flames on the attacking wolves. Upon witnessing the demonstration, Lion exclaimed, "That was incredibly cool." Aruto ran to Lion, who was already on his knees, thanking him profusely for the rescue. Lion explained that he had been following Aruto and inadvertently found himself in the upper levels. Aruto reprimanded him. "Beginners have nothing to do here." Lion reiterated his desire to team up with Naruto and Magica. Naruto, exasperated, asked him how many more times he had to repeat that Lion would just be a nuisance. Naruto claimed that he had no time for nonsense with him. Still on his knees, Lion quietly apologized to Naruto. Aruto, turning his back on him, told him that if he understood, he should have returned earlier. Just at that moment, a wolf pounced on Lion. Aruto, seeing this, quickly attacked the wolf in front of him, and then turned to the wounded Lion, asking him if he was alive. Aruto, kneeling next to her, couldn't believe his eyes. He was tormented by the idea that this was Aruto's fault. If Aruto had accepted Lion, he reflected, this would not have happened while Lion lay injured on the ground. As soon as Lion heard Aruto's words, he jumped up asking if it was true that Aruto could accept him. A surprised Aruto, still asking if Lion was alive, watched as Lion rubbed his neck and casually admitted that he hadn't mentioned him, but that he was a vampire. Aruto was completely stunned by this revelation. Vampires, a race often said to possess immortality, are known to hunt under the cover of night. Humans are afraid of them as much as any monster, but Naruto, pointing at Lion, asked if those statements were true. Lion replied that vampires weren't that different from humans, explaining that horror stories were human inventions. Their bodies, he clarified, were similar to those of humans, although serious injuries could be just as fatal. Lion then explained to Naruto that he was special and invulnerable. Hearing this, Naruto wondered if that invulnerability meant that he possessed the ability to regenerate. Naruto then asked how Lion got the wound. Lion replied that it was a long story, adding that he also possessed a high resistance to pain. Naruto pressed him to tell the story, and asked if such a skill could be acquired. Lion explained that no one, regardless of race, could simply obtain this ability, nor did he acquire it by his own efforts. He added that if he told Naruto, he wouldn't believe him. Lion then revealed that he was not of this world. Naruto was amazed. Lion explained that he once lived in another world, Japan, as an ordinary person. He died in an accident, but was reborn in Euphoria. During his last moments, a terrifying fear consumed him. Lion prayed desperately not to die, only to wake up in a new world, inhabiting a body that did not know the fear of death. Upon hearing Lion's story, Naruto reflected that others must have experienced similar rebirths. Lion then clarified that his resistance to pain had not appeared immediately. He gained this skill in the early years of his new life. At first, this new world seemed like a dream come true. A race of vampires, a body immune to the fear of death, and even the profession of a hero. Lion felt like the protagonist of some great story. However, that feeling evaporated a few years later. A vampire house started in Fortinia, driven by the teachings of the church, and Lion witnessed the brutal murder of his parents. As they could not kill him, they captured him and took him to the church as a heretic. There, in the name of divine justice, an endless ordeal began. Lion's body wasn't dying, but he felt every bit of pain. The daily suffering made him yearn for death as his greatest salvation. Despite his agony, he was still alive. 50 years later, her pain threshold was finally shattered. I couldn't feel a drop of pain anymore. Lion remembered this while standing over a burning bonfire. Taking advantage of that moment, Lion escaped. He ran for centuries, constantly hiding his true identity. Finally, he arrived in Kenetagras and found a job in the guild. After telling his dramatic movie story, Lion stood in front of Naruto and told him that he would not be able to acquire the same skill. Upon hearing the horrible story, Naruto could hardly believe the immense suffering Lion had endured. He apologized for making her relive such painful memories. Lion smiled and assured Naruto not to worry about it, stating that those days were long gone. Still, Lion confessed that he had one regret left. If only he had been strong enough, he could have protected his family. That was his only regret. Naruto recalled memories of his past life. Lion explained that he joined the guild not only to earn money, but also to become stronger. He asked Naruto again if he would form a team with him, but Naruto just turned around and left. Lion watched Naruto, considering him useless in silence. Naruto then challenged Lion, asking him how long he planned to stand there. He urged Lion to join him soon, asking if he feared the intensity of Naruto's training. Lion smiled with joy when he heard about the training, declaring his delight. Naruto, watching Lion play with the slime, realized that although he could not fully understand the difficulties of an immortal life, the fundamental desire to protect loved ones resonated deeply in him, and he could not to simply abandon someone like Lion. This is how his training began. Naruto resumed the battle against his opponents, honing his skills with the power of the Tomb Blinder. Shortly after, enemies that Naruto had previously fought attacked Lion, and he shouted for help to his teacher. Naruto realized the large number of opponents, and that Lion needed to stop fighting like a simple human. While Naruto decimated monsters, Lion protected his head from the chaotic attacks. Naruto advised Lion that while it was important to think through the attacks, as a vampire with superior strength, he needed to unleash his full power without hesitation first. Aruto handed a sword to Lion, and Lion, according to Aruto, immediately confronted the opponents. After knocking them down, Lion turned to Aruto, recognizing him as his master, and admitting that Aruto was right. It was then that Aruto witnessed Lion's true strength. While Lion was brandishing his sword, Aruto asked him about his strength and his standard of living. Lion replied that his level was 4. Aruto realized that this level equaled that of magic. From then on, Aruto's only goal was to train Lion. They continued to improve their skills. Lion's level or life increased at a terrifying rate. Initially, he struggled with some awkwardness, but he quickly overtook Aruto. They tackled the dungeons at a speed that Aruto had never imagined possible. Every 10 floors, Magica would team up with them to defeat the boss of the area. The floors were flying by. Upon defeating a particularly formidable monster, Lion confidently told his master that his time to clean up the dungeon would be legendary. Magica had never imagined that one day they would defeat the boss of the 90th floor. 6 years later, Aruto was standing over the fallen boss. She turned to Magica and Lion, thanking them for their unconditional support. His goal was the 100th floor, but time was quickly running out. He stated that from that moment on, the game would move to a completely new level. Hana's death was now only a year away. Shortly after, Aruto collected his belongings and left the guild. The owner then asked if Aruto was really leaving. Aruto confirmed his departure and thanked him for his hospitality. The girl asked him where Aruto planned to go, admitting that she would feel lonely without him. Aruto revealed his intention to attend a private school in the capital of Euphoria. Just at that moment, Magica and Lion ran down the stairs towards Aruto. Lion, turning to Aruto, asked him if he was really leaving town. Magica, standing next to Aruto, expressed her surprise, as she had not heard anything about his plans until now. Aruto had intended to leave on his own. Aruto then looked at his friends, who immediately asked him why he hadn't told them anything. Aruto simply replied that he intended to say goodbye. He reflected that Hana's death was now only a year away. All his attention should be focused on protecting her. A confrontation with Gamagan was inevitable. This battle could cost him his life, and he refused to endanger innocent people. Observing Aruto, Lion commented that he probably had his own reasons. Taking a step forward, Magica declared that she would accompany him, explaining that she had still not returned to Aruto. Everything he had done for her 6 years earlier. He added that Magica would not allow Aruto to escape when he had come this far. Lion, hugging Aruto, stated that he would of course join them, stating that students always follow in their teachers' footsteps. In the last 6 years, no young person had become stronger. Magica then added that if something happened, they would come to Aruto's rescue. Aruto, surprised at first, then laughed when he realized that he had no choice but to propose to them all to go together. With that, they got into the carriage and set off. While they were traveling through the mountains, Lion was sitting in the carriage, yawning and looking ahead, complaining of boredom. They had been traveling for 4 days, he wondered, and where were they even going? Aruto replied that once they got down the mountain, Lion would see everything for himself. If he had nothing else to do, he could join Aruto. Aruto was talking about his training, specifically about concentrating mana. At that moment, Magica sat next to him, watching Aruto. Upon hearing Aruto's offer, Lion turned it down, thanking him and commenting that only Aruto could train effectively just by standing still. Magica then asked Aruto what his plan was when he arrived at Euphoria. Aruto revealed his intention to enroll in the school, specifically mentioning the Royal Court institution as one of the best and most exclusive in the country. Lion, surprised by the news, questioned Aruto's seriousness about studying and his need. Aruto, however, remained silent. Suddenly, the carriage gave a jolt, almost throwing Lion out with a scream. Aruto and Magica exchanged surprised glances, watching their coachman, who then announced that a wheel had got stuck in a pothole. He would try to free her, but warned that they might not be able to continue. Magica turned to Aruto, asking what they should do. Aruto covered his face with his hands. Standing up, he looked at Magica and declared that there was no other choice. They would have to walk. Lion interrupted, assuring Naruto that it wouldn't be necessary and that Naruto should trust him. Moments later, the driver asked if Naruto could take the wheel out. Lion, unrolling his belt, dismissed the idea. He declared that the driver's help was no longer needed, instructing him to leave the cart and return with the horse alone. Without hesitation, Lion lifted the entire huge section of land on which the cart rested and began to run with it through the mountains. He imagined that this unconventional transport would be more heroic, but he was also eager to cover ground quickly. Placing the cart back on the ground, Lion turned to the master, asking if his efforts had been satisfactory. The teacher, looking inside, saw Magica and Naruto scattered on top of each other, and commented that such an immense force should have been taken into account. Naruto, clearly annoyed, called Lion, threatening to leave him behind the next time, and he would do a stunt like that again. Lion sat rubbing a bump on his head. He reflected that Naruto would surely appreciate his faster pace, looking back at the path they had traveled, sure that they had indeed saved considerable time. Soon, the capital of Euphoria spread out before them. Naruto instructed Magica and Lion to take care of the luggage while he went ahead. Jumping out, Naruto ran towards the city gates. While Naruto was running, his thoughts were focused on Hana. He was here so close, his beloved and only Hana. He reflected on his shared past, which was driving him towards the royal school. Even if they weren't destined to be lovers again in this life, he longed to see her now. Meanwhile, Hana was standing in the middle of a street. A woman next to her asked her why she seemed so surprised. Hana explained that her heart had suddenly started beating hard, a feeling similar to having the much-wanted person incredibly close. "I've never felt anything like this before." The woman replied, "Who knows, maybe the person that fate has prepared for you is nearby." Intrigued by the idea of a predestined person, Hana asked who it could be. The woman admitted she couldn't tell, but assured Hana not to worry. "The moment I met him, everything would become clear." Hana wondered how she would recognize someone she didn't know at all, but such were the designs of human fate. At the same instant, Naruto came out of a tunnel towards the city, staying incredibly close to her. Lion and Magica also entered the city. Lion observed the city, commenting on how it resembled a capital, a city worthy of Naruto. Naruto, whom they had just reached, asked what Lion meant. Lion then explained that, in his world, such great cities always offered jobs for heroes. Naruto was momentarily speechless, but explained that this city, the heart of the kingdom, was home to 3 billion people. Pointing towards the castle, Naruto directed Lion's gaze towards the royal castle, indicating the surrounding administrative organs. The residences of the highest aristocracy lined the streets, and an imposing Fortemis state church stood in front of the castle. He stressed the need for discretion, given the influential residents of the city. Moments later, Lion saw Fortemis inside the church, and declared his strong aversion to approaching her. After checking into a hotel, Naruto asked what Magica and Lion were planning to do, as he was planning to start preparing for the entrance exams of the royal school. Lion expressed surprise at the existence of an entrance exam. Naruto clarified that it was natural, given the school's reputation as the best in the country. The city had a guild and a dungeon, although smaller than those of Kenetaga's. Naruto reflected that finding adventures shouldn't be a problem for them. Naruto informed them that he had shared the details of their accommodation, urging them to call if they needed anything. Lion confirmed that everything was fine. After exchanging glances with Magica, they left Naruto alone. As Naruto approached the royal court school for his admission campaign, he considered the huge number of applicants. This year, 10,000 applicants were competing for only 100 places. Finding Hana in such a crowd was like looking for a needle in a haystack, Naruto reflected, deciding to take a look inside while he had the chance. Soon he passed by a bench that caught his eye, triggering a memory of his past life. It was a place he and Hana shared frequently. It had been 70 years, Naruto realized, and he decided that if he succeeded, he would surely find her. Suddenly, something caught Naruto's attention. He saw Lion pleading with a member of the admissions committee, asking if he could turn a blind eye. The girl, however, explained that she could not. Aruto then asked Lion and Magica about their presence. Lion saw Aruto and turned to the teacher. Magica claimed that they were there to test their strength and take the exam. Lion immediately retorted, revealing that she was not telling the truth. The real goal of Magica was simply to get Aruto into school. Magica quickly punched Lion, ordering him to shut up. From the ground, Lion demanded to know why Magica was hitting him so hard. Standing up, she replied that if she had used all her strength, he would not have been able to get up at all. A member of the admissions committee then approached Aruto, asking about the exam fee. Hearing this, Aruto seemed genuinely surprised by the requirement. Lion, still on the ground, explained that they did not have enough funds, and that they had tried to negotiate. Aruto immediately asked what happened to the money they had accumulated. Magica revealed that Lion had let them down, spending all their savings on expensive food while, as they toured the elite district, Aruto started berating them for their actions in his absence, but a new voice interrupted, stating that this year's students were exceptionally loud. Suddenly, a gust of wind magic engulfed the group, leaving them disoriented. A man materialized before them, proclaiming that the school was a place of rich history and noble traditions, not for uncivilized provincials. Aruto recognized Deutsch. Lion boldly challenged, "And who is this?" He continued, pointing out the hypocrisy. The man who called them uncivilized provincials had just thrown magic at them. "If he's looking for a fight," Lion declared, clenching his fist, already prepared. Aruto quickly intervened, urging Lion to calm down. He was a school teacher, and causing trouble would negatively affect his exam results. Aruto privately reflected on Deutsch's character. He had always been obsessed with the social status and standard of living of students. The professor then asked about his origins, noting his not noble appearance. But then, when he saw Aruto, he went straight to him. "Are you really planning to take our exam with only a first level of living?" Aruto looked back at him, surprised by the direct confrontation. Deutsch dismissed the matter, telling Aruto that he should just go home. His chances of passing were nil, and he would only pay the registration fee in vain. Looking at Magica and Lion, Deutsch added that he didn't think Aruto's teammates stood a chance either. Aruto, however, quietly concluded that Deutsch had left him no choice, mentally thanking him for his concern, leaving a bag of money to cover the registration fee. Aruto declared that he would enroll and prove his worth, not with words, but with the results of his exam. He firmly believed that this school, despite Deutsch's prejudices, was made up of staff who judged students solely on their merits. Aruto turned around and left. Deutsch watched the trio leaving. Aruto's arrogance, he reflected, was astonishing. Aruto, with only a first-class standard of living, really believed himself to be something extraordinary. If so, Deutsch decided, he really wanted to witness what Aruto was capable of. With that thought, he also set off in the opposite direction. The exam consisted of 2 phases: a written test before lunch and a practice after. The students gathered in the classroom first for the written part. Aruto's task was to calculate the departure times of 3 detachments, one mounted at 10 km per hour, one on foot at 4 km per hour, and one team at 2 km per hour, ensuring that all 3 simultaneously arrived at a destination at 30 miles away. Aruto, while solving the problem, looked at Lion, wondering if he was okay, as the young man was visibly struggling. Then he observed Magica, who seemed to handle him with ease, clearly a result of her diligent preparation. Aruto realized that he couldn't afford to relax either. Moments later, Deutsch appeared right in front of Aruto, contemplating the futility of a simple level 1 trying to pass. He reflected that the written results alone would not be enough, and that there would be no mercy in the practical part, that he himself would supervise. Banging his cane on the floor, Deutsch announced that it was time to start the practical exam. He addressed the students, explaining that his task was to destroy the cube placed in front of him. Deutsch warned them that they could use any method, but that it would not be easy at all. From the podium, our heroes were intently watching the events. Following Deutsch's instructions, The students took turns trying to break the cube. None of them managed to make progress. Despite all the attempts, the cube remained inflexible, and scribbled in his notebook, "Another year full of wimps." Deutsch, noticing that no one had approved yet, muttered, "Who could break this damn enhanced magic?" Then Magica jumped onto the field, while Lion excitedly shouted at her to show off. She just told him to shut up. Dutch recognized Magica as the squirrel that had caused a ruckus in the admissions office. Her name, he reflected, sounded familiar. It doesn't matter, he thought. She's just a beast of a woman. He probably relies on brute force, but reinforced magic is top-notch. It is impossible to destroy it with a simple half-hearted attack, Deutsch stated. Magica then lifted the cube, quickly deciphering its hidden mechanisms. With a precise blow, he cracked it and then shattered it completely. The crowd erupted in applause, getting to their feet and hailing Magica for splitting the bucket and doing a great job. Deutsch, witnessing this, was struggling to comprehend the attack. It was not simply a blow of incredible speed and precision. Examining the shattered cube and replaying the attack in his mind, he realized that she had dealt numerous blows at exactly the same point. A sudden memory came to his mind: Magical Esther, the same magical one designated by the Vatican as a risk factor. Why did this beast woman come to school? He wondered aloud, and then declared, "The girl has approved." The next one was Lion. Approaching the cube, he confidently declared, "I am next." Dutch, watching him, dismissed him as a mere fool, certainly not a designated risk factor. Lion then placed a sphere directly over the cube, warning everyone to get ready. In an instant, everything was annihilated. Deutsch, shielding his eyes with his cane, was struggling to comprehend the scene. In the middle of the million fragments of the cube, Lion asked nonchalantly, "Was that normal?" Deutsch, still shocked, stared at the young man. In all his years supervising exams, he had never witnessed such an absolute destruction of the cube. Then, bristling with anger, Deutsch declared, "The boy has approved." Lion, leaning towards Deutsch, confirmed his approval and expressed relief that the professor had not been injured. Deutsch, visibly distressed, announced the next examinee, although his expression conveyed a desperate need for a break to recover. Suddenly, the testing ground was restored. Deutsch was completely baffled by how these self-taught students, one of them a Vatican-designated risk factor, had managed to decimate the entire exam site. "There were never such results," Deutsch exclaimed to all the teachers, reporting the unprecedented result. The admissions committee expressed concern about the new applicants. "Are we really sure about enrolling them?" one asked. Another teacher highlighted their fourth-level skills, suggesting, "If they join the Eponian army, they will bring glory to our school." However, a different voice argued that their problems were clear. All eyes turned to Dutch, waiting for his decision. He acknowledged his behavioral problems, but replied, "Not every day we receive students with a fourth standard of living." The teachers were convinced, if Dutch guides them, they will become excellent students. Given Deutsch's insistence, they agreed to accept the new students. Deutsch, reviewing the list, identified a single problematic student, Aruto. Despite his previous success, Aruto was a deserter with a first standard of living, and, by regulation, he should be rejected. A gloomy premonition seized Deutsch. If Aruto passed, he would stain the school's reputation forever. Deutsch then performed the yarn spell on the bucket. He decided to refuse Aruto at any cost, placing a reinforced cube on the stage in front of everyone. He announced the completion of restoration works and the resumption of exams, vowing internally to prevent any level 1 students from enrolling. The cube was enchanted with reinforcement magic, augmented by Yahello's absorption, making it stronger with every force applied. Deutsch believed that even a practitioner of powerful magic would have difficulty destroying him. And so he gave the signal for the start of the next test. The next student to take the stage wasn't Aruto, which made Deutsch curse to himself. "I was hoping Aruto would be next." There had been 3 students previously. This young man had not approached the desk with them. Deutsch, skeptical that the current contestant could pass, simply motioned for him to get started. The student launched his attack on the cube. Observing, Deutsch reflected. Are all students at this level like this? This young man has no control over the mana. Why was I so worried about Aruto if this one is so much worse? At that moment, Deutsch stated that the student had failed, but then the cube began to transform. Deutsch watched, bewildered, as energy gushed out of the cube, followed by a torrent of red mana. He stumbled, unable to comprehend the unfolding chaos. Everyone looked down, confused by the spectacle. There was talk among the spectators about how impressive the previous student had been, but the current situation was much more critical. The mana was out of control. From the stands, Aruto descended, ordering everyone to evacuate and declaring that he would stop the mana. As Aruto was coming down, a powerful whirlwind formed before him. He realized that the mana was not only runaway. Something much deeper was happening. At that moment, Aruto watched Deutsch struggling against the immense pressure. Realizing that even his protective magic wouldn't hold, if Aruto wasn't careful, the situation would quickly turn into a disaster. Deutsch moved to help the student, realizing that his own magic was completely exhausted. If the chaos continued, injuries were inevitable. Caught in the whirlwind, Deutsch took off a magic shield, but it quickly faltered. He couldn't hold it. Then Aruto used his unique ability to calm the stormy winds. Deutsch watched, completely amazed. Aruto approached them, asking if everyone was okay. Deutsch asked Aruto, "How are you?" "I acted according to the instructions," Aruto replied. "It didn't matter what. You had to deploy shields and ensure security." "I'll take care of the popping," he ordered Deutsch. Deutsch pestered Aruto not to talk nonsense, stating that even he was capable of handling such a situation. Aruto simply held his gaze. The professor warned that the bucket was now incredibly dangerous. The slightest movement carried the risk of an explosion. Aruto extended his hand towards the cube, channeling his energy to stop its volatile reaction. Deutsch watched, amazed, wondering, had Aruto neutralized the mana? Although injured, Aruto concentrated on the cube, managing to stop its energy, and taking it carefully in his hands. "It seems that Aos was imposed on this bucket," Aruto commented. Aruto explained that since this school exclusively enrolls students with strong magical abilities, the teacher might not know that this particular spell is only activated with very weak magic, possessing a unique effect that makes it extremely flimsy. Deutsch then looked at Aruto, asking him who he was. The professor reflected that Aruto, as he had suspected, was a half-educated man with the first standard of living. He realized that even someone from such a modest background could achieve anything if he worked tirelessly. Suddenly, the cube, having radiated all its energy, shattered. Deutsch stated that Aruto had passed the exam. Afterwards, everyone congratulated the examinees who had passed. Later in a store, the uniforms of the court school were tried on. The salesman congratulated them on having passed the exam, and Aruto and his companions, dressed in their new outfits, looked remarkably striking. Lion, adjusting his new clothes, commented that he had never worn something so luxurious before. Aruto, addressing Lion, commented on how well the new outfit fit, especially Lion. As Lion was not responding, he finally turned to Aruto asking for clarification. At that moment, Magica joined them, asking if there wasn't something more comfortable. She was wearing a uniform with a skirt, explaining that such an outfit would hinder her movements, and that her feet were freezing. Upon seeing her, the guys immediately commented on how well the outfit fit, making her look like a real aristocrat. Lion, looking at Magic, joked with a proverb, "A log looks good in a headdress." Magica quickly hit him on the head, replying that she had not given him permission to speak. With that, they proceeded to choose the uniforms together. The seller then asked if there had been any problems with his measurements. The group claimed that everything was perfect. Handing them a form, the seller explained that the preparation would take no more than 2 weeks, and would cost 10 gold per person. When they saw the cost, the group seemed perplexed, not knowing if they really had to pay for their new clothes. Aruto, noticing their reaction, turned to them, and asked them what was wrong. Leon replied that 10 gold coins could support someone for half a year, emphasizing that it was just clothes. Aruto understood then that his teammates didn't have any money either and said that he would pay for them. Recognizing that there was no other option, Magica immediately intervened, saying that that was not acceptable, since Naruto was already covering his exam fee. The group then approached the seller to ask if the payment could be made at the moment of delivery, and he confirmed without hesitation that such an agreement was possible. So, dragging Naruto with them, they decided to go directly to the guild in search of the most profitable tasks. Naruto, puzzled, asked if they were really dragging him into this as well. Leon explained that, like his mentor, Naruto could not abandon his students in distress. So, they arrived at the guild and checked the bulletin board for commissions. They found requests to exterminate goblins offering 12 copper coins and to defeat a giant sewer rat for 20 of silver. Lion reflected, these applications do not pay much. At this rate, we won't accumulate 10 gold coins in 2 weeks, although there are quite a few tasks available. Before we reach the royal capital, suddenly, Lion saw a promising task with a reward of 30 gold. Naruto, looking at Lion, questioned the significant payment and the nature of the task. After reading it, Lion revealed that it required subduing a fire dragon that dwelt in the northern mountains. Naruto immediately declared that the task was impossible. Everyone, surprised, pressed him to give a reason. Naruto explained that dragons were legendary creatures, survivors of the War of the Gods 150 years ago. The mere appearance of one, he said, could unleash a catastrophe capable of destroying an entire country. Hearing about such a catastrophe, Magica wondered if such monsters really existed in this world. Naruto clarified that, although they did not appear often, they certainly existed. In a previous life, he had met once and even fought a dragon. But even at level 99, his only option was to escape. Lion asked Naruto if the danger was really that immense. He stated, if that's the case, 30 gold coins is a ridiculous price. Although it is certainly high, it is immeasurable with the risk. As a former employee of the guild, I would say that 1,000 gold coins would be more appropriate. Naruto realized that Leon's assessment was correct. Magica turned to Leon, asking if the request could be disinformation. Lion, still holding the piece of paper, replied that if it was, the oversight committee would have pulled the ad by now. They are very strict about misinformation here, he added. Naruto realized that this was his chance to alter history. There is something hidden in this request, he reflected. Naruto, now intrigued, told the group that he was curious and that they should accept the request. Lion, upon leaving, stated that he would take care of all the preparations. Naruto stressed that encountering a dragon was extremely rare, which required proper preparation. Unbeknownst to them, someone was watching their conversation. A week later, the group found themselves fighting monsters again. Magica, perched on top of a huge boar, expressed her frustration. No matter how hard we search, we only find minor creatures. Perhaps the task was really a hoax. Lion, exploring the surroundings, ruled out the possibility. Naruto, approaching the already defeated monster, noticed the waning light and suggested that they camp. After setting up camp, the companions lit a fire and started eating. Lion praised the delicious food, adding that eating together was still the best part of their trip. Naruto, examining a piece of slime in his hands, commented that the sale of the magic materials and stones they had collected would cover the cost of their uniforms. He regretted that he had not met the dragon, but concluded that they must return to Euponia the next morning. While Magica was eating, she expressed how much she would miss their adventures together. Naruto confirmed his feelings, saying that he would miss them too. But that night, I had something I wanted to give them. His companions asked what it was. Naruto then took out some pendants that he had made using his blacksmithing skills, infusing them with all his strength, and gave one to each one. Magically, holding her pendant, she felt a mysterious force, at once soft and deeply strong. Naruto reflected that at first he had assumed that he would always be alone, but now they were sitting together around a bonfire. She had never imagined such warmth in her future. Therefore, these pendants served as her way of expressing gratitude. Naruto, smiling, thanked his friends. After dinner, the companions fell asleep. Naruto's eyes suddenly opened, finding the heat unbearable and the sleep impossible. Soon after, everyone else woke up questioning the intense heat. On leaving the tent, they discovered the forest on fire, engulfed in fire. Could it be a dragon? Suddenly, a giant dragon let out a piercing scream. His companions, staring at him, knew that he was really a dragon. The guild's assignment turned out to be true. They realized that the dragon itself was engulfed in flames, a luminous signal that screamed at them to run. Just then, Lion asked about the gems. His companions grabbed him, urging him to run faster. The dragon immediately spat out flames, right where Lion had been moments before, and they narrowly escaped. Lion's legs were smoking from the dragon's scorching attack. Trapped, they found themselves surrounded by a circle of flames. Magica declared that there was nowhere left to run. It seemed that his only chance of survival was to defeat this dragon. Naruto remembered that the dragons he had fought against in a previous life were intelligent enough to talk like humans. But this dragon remained silent and seemed smaller, which led Naruto to deduce that he was facing an even more powerful enemy. Naruto took courage. He couldn't let the fear overwhelm him, or he wouldn't save Hana. Without hesitation, Naruto attacked the dragon with a water cut, reasoning that water was the inherent weakness of a fire dragon. Immediately, the dragon conjured up a shield, an unexpected move that stunned Naruto. He realized that Magica would not be able to get through it. Magica sprang into action, declaring her intention to help. Lion joined her, and together they assaulted the dragon. After striking the dragon, Magica realized his formidable physical strength and concluded that his current attacks would not significantly affect his life. Naruto recalled his past life, deducing that the dragon must have had a weak point. He shouted at Magica to distract the creature, planning to strike a decisive blow himself. Magica tried to attract the dragon's attention, but her efforts proved futile. Fleeing from the dragon flames, Lion exclaimed his bewilderment, wondering why they were relentlessly chasing him despite not having attacked. Naruto realized that although it was not the ideal time to change strategy, Lion's provocative abilities could be the key. Turning to Lion, Naruto announced that he had a great plan. Lion urged his master not to delay and reveal it. Naruto then surprisingly ordered Lion to let himself be beaten by the dragon, practically begging him. Lion, completely perplexed, could not understand what Naruto was asking of him. Even with his immortality, Lion refused to simply endure an attack. Naruto assured his friend that everything would be fine, promising to use his magic to weaken the dragon, and asking for Lion's trust. Lion, with no other choice, reluctantly trusted Naruto. "He is a very cruel mentor," Lion muttered, as he prepared to face the dragon directly. Naruto launched a cutting attack, and together they resisted the dragon. Naruto then ordered Magica to attack. Magica, upon observing the dragon, realized that his abdominal scales were a weak point. He hit it directly, and the dragon howled in pain. Realizing that his attack had worked, he knew that he had to act decisively. He unleashed an icy star. As Magica prepared to attack again, the dragon struck her with its tail, sending her to the ground, motionless. At that moment, Naruto and Lion were very afraid of magic. Just as Magica was knocked to the ground by the dragon, the pendant around her neck suddenly activated, its properties designed to prevent instant death. As she plummeted towards the earth, she felt the pendant pull at her and guide her. This equipment prevented an instant death, ensuring that he did not perish on impact. As she tried to get up, Magica realized that the dragon was trying to step on her. The others immediately shouted his name and rushed to his aid. Moments later, the dragon stomped where Magica had been, only to find no one under his foot. He looked around, confused, unable to understand where he had disappeared to. Naruto had managed to save Magica. Lion helped him hold her and admitted that he hadn't realized that the gravity spell could be used that way. Naruto explained that at times like this, he was perfect for an urgent escape. Lion held Magica, asking if she was okay. She confirmed that yes. Then he turned to Naruto, asking about the antileptic. Naruto replied that she was in the store, but the dragon had burned her. Just then, the slime next to Naruto presented him with something. Naruto was stunned, struggling to believe that the Slim had recovered the antileptic. Lion patted Naruto on the shoulder, calling him a good guy. They immediately administered the antileptic to Magica. She quickly revived, apologizing for her carelessness. He admitted that without the pendant that Naruto had given him, he certainly would not have survived. Now, however, she was ready to show the dragon what she was really capable of. The others urged her not to rush, insisting that Naruto and Lion would take care of the dragon, and that Magica should hide with him. Magica confronted Naruto, declaring that she could still fight. He argued that Lion alone would be too big a burden for Naruto, and who would finish off the dragon then. Lion just stared at Magica. Naruto, however, claimed that he understood his point. It was then decided that a strategic meeting was necessary. While they worked out a strategy, the dragon continued to lurk in search of them. Moments later, Leon came out to confront the dragon, asking him what he was looking for, boldly calling him an airhead and proclaiming his presence. The dragon immediately charged. Lion realized that he needed to distract the beast just for a minute, while Naruto prepared a trap. He hit a nearby tree, saying loudly that he was not as fast as magic, and that he could not play with the dragon for long. However, he excelled in strength and endurance. The dragon burned the toppled tree that Lion threw directly in his path, and continued its charge towards him. Lion then turned to Naruto, asking if he needed much more time. Naruto replied that the preparation was almost complete, and asked for just a little more time. Lion, to buy more time for Naruto, threw a stone at the dragon. The beast dodged him, unknowingly falling directly into Naruto's trap. Realizing his success, Lion unleashed a powerful blow against the now trapped dragon. Just then, Magica's voice rang out in the air, yelling at Lion, "It's faster or he's rushing at me with all his might." Naruto urged everyone, warning that the spell would only hold the dragon for 10 seconds. After that, they wouldn't stand a chance. Lion, getting ready to launch Magica, asked if the dwarf was ready, to which she replied in disbelief. "Are you really asking me that?" With a strong impulse, Lion threw Magica into the air, yelling at her to keep going. Magica, using the Star-Spangled Banner and the Fist of Dreams, attacked the dragon. But it simply responded with a burst of flames. While descending, Magica apologized, explaining that the dragon's reaction was completely wrong. The beast, not particularly intelligent, had fallen into his trap. Using their spells as bait, they had managed to lure him to look up. Now, a critical weak spot was exposed, and it was up to Lion to deliver the final blow. A task his teammates believed he was capable of. Wielding the Sword of Valor, Lion charged, cleanly severing the dragon's head. In that triumphant moment, the beast fell, and the whole group burst into cheers, their victory being perfectly coordinated. Turning to Naruto, Lion anxiously asked if he could now call himself a dragon slayer. Naruto affirmed it, praising his excellent stroke. Lion, overflowing with joy, declared, "I finally got it. He sounds damn brave." Magica, however, couldn't believe that Naruto had entrusted Lion with the final blow. Lion was completely taken aback by his comment, wondering if he really meant to pick a fight. The next moment, Magica frankly admitted that she believed Lion had really put in the effort this time, and that she would count on him if anything else was needed. Lion, looking at Magica, didn't know if she was praising him or if she was just crazy. Naruto was just silently watching his companions, but at that moment, everyone felt a sudden dizziness, unable to understand its cause. Clutching her head, Magica wondered aloud, was that really the dizziness from leveling up? Naruto then realized that his system indicated a rise of 8 levels, taking him to level 78. It was a significant leap, as he had barely gained a single level recently, even after killing numerous demons. Naruto hugged his friends, who questioned the sudden gesture. He warned them that if they fainted now, they would risk waking up inside a monster's stomach in the morning. Summoning a stone wall to protect themselves, they collapsed, and Naruto entrusted his safety to Ru. Ru, always loyal, obeyed his master without hesitation. Tonight, the moon was casting a peculiarly beautiful light. The companions fainted, and the next morning, when they woke up, They were disoriented by what lay before them. A scorching heat enveloped them, and a blinding red light pulsed before their eyes. When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw a colossal magic stone, the magic stone of a dragon. Turning to Ru, Naruto asked her if he had really dragged her here. A tired Ru confirmed it. Praising Ru, Naruto commented that he had even managed to pick up a magic stone while staying vigilant. He hugged Ru, expressing his pride, which made the spirit very happy. Magica, looking at Naruto, commented that she had never seen such a vibrant magic stone. Lion, with his gaze fixed on her, repeated the question, "Is that really a dragon stone?" As everyone gazed at her, they were struck by her sheer beauty. Maybe if they just introduced her, people would think they had defeated a dragon. Looking at the huge corpse behind them, Naruto realized that this stone was just one of the many proofs. The next moment, drawing his sword, Naruto began to cut off the dragon's leg. Lion, puzzled, asked what Naruto was doing. Naruto replied that they weren't just going to abandon the entire dragon here. Take their scales, for example, sewn into clothing. They could create armor capable of deflecting iron swords. Their claws could be forged into razor-thin blades, sharp enough to cut through steel. It was even rumored that a cloak made of his skin offered protection against magical attacks. Pointing to a shiny object, Naruto identified a rare and valuable component, the dragon's eye. It has an incredibly high price. The others looked on in shock as Naruto held a huge eyeball. Then, with sparkling eyes, Naruto declared that he had found the rarest material, the dragon's heart. At that moment, Lion fainted. Magica, lifting Naruto by the neck, tried to revive Lion, surprised that he had collapsed. Magica, looking at Naruto, asked him what the dragon's heart was for. Naruto explained that if it is allowed to sit for about 3 years, it transforms into resurrection medicine. Magica recalled hearing about a similar medicine, but she didn't know that it was made from dragon hearts. Lion then clarified that, unfortunately, only humans could be revived. Having meticulously dismantled the dragon, Naruto calculated that the loot was certainly enough to cover the cost of his uniforms. He realized that he wouldn't have to worry about money for a while. Turning to Magica, Naruto warned her not to overspend. Magica nodded. Naruto then pondered on how to transport the remaining valuable materials, reluctant to leave them behind. At that moment, Lion, already awake, mentioned how useful an inventory skill would be. Naruto was astounded by the mention of an inventory. Lion had a hard time explaining, suggesting that it was as if Naruto stored objects in invisible cells. Probably something he had seen in the games. Turning to Naruto, Lion asked for clarification, exclaiming, "What is this? It can't be. The ability to store an infinite number of things is beyond human capabilities." Naruto reflected that with their bag destroyed, they would have to carry only what they could carry, and come back for the rest. Then the slime turned to him, and Naruto asked what was wrong. The slime presented him with his bag, and Naruto suddenly understood how Ru had taken it out of his body. Naruto then wondered if Ru could move the dragonstone the same way. Thinking it was impossible, Naruto turned to Ru and asked if he could absorb such a large amount of material. Ru simply opened her mouth and absorbed all the objects in front of her, leaving Naruto and his companion stunned. Lion, grabbing the slime, declared, "The inventory does not exist." At this, Naruto wept, regretting that all his careful selection of materials had been in vain. While Naruto and his companions were sitting, with Naruto being comforted, an invisible observer was watching them. This girl reflected that only 3 individuals, in particular that boy, had managed to kill an entire dragon. It seemed that God was right after all. He eagerly anticipated the surprises that the future held for him. Upon arriving at the guild, Naruto announced that everyone should listen carefully, as they had completed the Dragon House application. Lion then invited the guild members to inspect the materials. The appraiser commented that although the materials looked decent, there were many ways to acquire them, such as through auctions. However, the guild staff stated that they could not buy the materials or pay the reward, asking the group to take them away. Lion immediately replied that they were not goods intended for resale. Naruto, watching from behind, realized that these tests would be insufficient. He reflected on the unchanging nature of fate, destiny, as the path of each individual was predestined, and the immense difficulty of deviating from it. Such cognitive blind spots, he considered, were common consequences for those who defied their inherent destiny. Much like the same magic that prevails in this world. Turning to Lion, Naruto apologized, stating that they had no choice but to give in. Lion, bewildered, could not understand why, especially since they had really defeated the dragon. However, the guild members were not convinced. Naruto then explained his real goal: to earn enough for the uniforms. They would look for an alternative method to sell their materials. Lion recognized that it was a valid course of action, but he could not resign himself to surrender. Suddenly, a voice cut the air, berating them for their excessive noise. Naruto looked up. A wave of surprise invaded him when he saw who he was talking to. The girl interrupted. Even if the quarrels are the main decoration of the guild, this is too much. Did you guys know that? Then they asked for the identity of the girl in front of them. She introduced herself as Citri Justice, the future head of the Duchy of Justice. Lion claimed that he did not understand the stranger's words, but firmly asked her not to get into their argument. The girl replied that he had asked for her name, and she had simply replied. Then he asked, "What kind of barbarian adventurers are you?" Lion visibly struggled to keep his composure, and then demanded clarification on the girl's latest comment. Naruto, intervening, urged him to calm down. Naruto studied the girl, repeating her name to himself. He recognized her as an officer of the judicial organ of the country of the Council of the True and the False, one of the 12 generals of Euphony. What was she doing here? Naruto reflected. Examining the items placed before the tracers, the girl took one, identifying it as cerebrospinal fluid from a fresco. This proves that the material was collected only a few days after the dragon's death, confirming that it had not been resold. They even bothered to ask the boys to buy these materials, he claimed. And if Citri insisted, they would accept. The girl then approached Naruto, leaning over to express her disbelief that he had become a dragon slayer at such a young age. "I can't wait to see what else you've saved for the future," she added as Naruto, sweating, simply stared at her. When leaving the guild, a delighted Lion grabbed 150 gold coins, exclaiming that he had never seen so much money. Magica, however, quickly reminded him that they could not spend it freely. Naruto was walking behind them, wondering why Citri had spoken to him instead of Magica or Lion. Had she really discovered his plan? He had spent more than 10 years meticulously planning Hana's rescue. Their current accommodation was already an integral part of their operations. If I had known this would happen, should I have altered the plan? Then he decided not to change anything, realizing that doing so would be bluffing. There was nothing left but to proceed as planned, trusting that everything was fine. So far, everything had been going well, Naruto reassured himself. Meanwhile, Citri was training in the courtyard, quickly defeating his opponent. A footman approached, asking her to stop, noticing that Citri had won, and seemed more active than usual. "Did something happen in the city?" he asked. She replied that she thought she had found her little man, and affirmed that God's words really prevailed. It was worth sending an application for the extermination of dragons. The state strives to kill dragons at any cost, although it is an impossible feat for a single person. It's very unlikely. But if someone deviates from the fate ordained by God, if someone appears and kills a dragon, it is this little man, who will bring the world to disaster, a new source of danger. I wasn't absolutely sure, but I couldn't ignore it. When her eyes met that boy's, a flash of fighting spirit, she reflected, remembering Naruto. Sight believed that if he had not followed a righteous path, he would never have revealed such a spirit. Moments later, he effortlessly deflected his opponent's attack, and urged Lord Fortames to watch closely. He intended to reveal Naruto's true nature. Under the radiant sun, Naruto, Magica and Lion arrived at the school, to see the newly announced class assignments. Lion eagerly searched for his name, and found it. Lion was also enrolled in Class C. Next to the names were the exam grades, which led Lion to wonder why the assignments were no longer strictly based on merit. If this was true, why was he still in the second lowest class? Magica suggested that Aruto's written exam grades were perhaps catastrophically low. Aruto then asked what class they had put Magica. Magica proudly announced that she was in class and that she was a scholarship student. Lion couldn't believe what she was hearing, as Aruto congratulated her with genuine warmth. Magica then asked, "Didn't they also put you in class A, Aruto?" Aruto reported that he had been placed in class D, completely surprising his two classmates. Lion, falling to the ground, regretted that Aruto had prepared for so long, and yet ended up in a lower class than his. Jokingly, he accused Aruto of perhaps having written the answers in the wrong places. At that, Magica blurted out that Lion was an idiot, berating him for his rudeness and hitting him. Aruto explained that, as someone from a peasant family with a humble standard of living, anything above the class of was out of his reach, no matter his qualifications. In addition, Aruto revealed that school life was of little importance to him. He didn't care about his assignment. Everything was fine. At Aruto's words, his teammates were completely surprised. The next moment, they arrived at the school and were already saying goodbye, heading to their respective classes. Aruto hoped that they would both fit in at school and approached his own class, where he believed his problems would begin. If he remembered correctly, a stream of water would fall on him the moment he opened these doors. The student who had been practicing claimed that he was practicing magic of water, then apologized for the mishap, insisting that it was not on purpose, and asked for Aruto's forgiveness, despising him as the garbage of poor peasants. Aruto remembered the taunts of the upper classes aimed at the lower ones and understood the situation instantly, wishing him success with his plan. Aruto noticed that the scenario unfolded exactly as before. The other students, watching Aruto, were puzzled as to why he wasn't wet. The other student, regaining control of his magic, commented that his friend was not very good at controlling it. It was his turn, so he attacked Aruto. However, Aruto countered his magic with his own, staying effortlessly dry. The young man who attacked Aruto couldn't understand how he had repelled his spell so easily. Aruto, sitting down and opening his bag, reflected that in his past life, such a feat would be considered great sorcery. His attackers did not understand what he meant, concluding that Aruto must have a powerful magical armor, undoubtedly stolen from somewhere. They were convinced that they needed to get her back. Using fire magic, the young man declared, "That was a bit of a dangerous spell. But if Aruto was wearing armor, then it was nothing terrible." Looking at his opponents, Aruto realized that he was being treated like a thief. He reflected, "I was really so reckless as to use offensive magic in front of everyone. Still, his abilities can't be that strong." At that moment, another student entered the classroom and threw a fireball. At that moment, Haruto jumped up and managed to avoid an attack that could have hit the girl. He moved with such blinding speed that he startled the attacker, and then declared, even if it was just a practice, it was dangerous to use attack spells in class. And if someone gets hurt, the next time he warned his opponent, pay more attention. The bewildered attacker could not understand who had just intervened. At that moment, a girl coming into the classroom asked, what was going on? Aruto, fearing to turn around, realized that this was the meeting he had been waiting for so long. As he turned around, he saw Hana standing right in front of him. Approaching Hana, Aruto casually explained that someone was simply practicing magic, assuring her that everything was fine, and not to worry. Aruto's eyes filled with tears as he considered the immense pain he was destined to endure. He couldn't get involved with Hana again. He had only 5 years of his own life left. If they rekindled their past love, he knew that he would have to leave her once again, preferring that they remain strangers to forcing her to go through such agony. Hana's death was only 4 months away. Aruto left the classroom assuring himself that everything was fine. Mentally, he swore to Hana, "I will definitely protect you." When Hana saw Aruto, she couldn't believe her eyes. Her presence at this school was, for Hana Kohn, nothing less than a miracle. The Kennels were a venerable and high-ranking noble family in the kingdom of Euphony. As the heiress of the family, high hopes were placed on her. Her parents provided her with one of the best mentors in the world, but she seemed unable to do anything. The mentor, talking to his parents, stated that he had never met a person so completely devoid of talent. Hannah was silently watching the conversation from behind the doors. The mentor then elaborated, explaining that talent or aptitude was an integral part of human development. His innate talent registered at an undeniable level 4. But at such low level, nothing significant could ever be built, let alone an excellent foundation. The mentor, although hesitant to bother them, clearly stated that his daughter did not possess any talents. 10 years had passed since then. Just as the mentor predicted, Hannah was constantly failing. No matter what he tried, he couldn't advance a single level. Everyone left her, even her own father. Despite her difficulties, Hannah continued to struggle, managing to enroll in this school, thanks to political maneuvers. The school, in turn, could not afford for its incompetence to become public and stain the esteemed name of the Kennels. Hannah believed that she needed to be as discreet as possible, almost without breathing, so as not to be noticed, and never express an opinion so as not to make herself known. Her existence had to be erased, ensuring that no one made fun of her, allowing her to simply remain alone. However, upon entering the classroom, she felt an undeniable change in her life. She recalled a conversation with her mother, who had once told her about her fiancé. Her mother admitted that she did not know who he was, but assured her that when they met, she would instinctively recognize him. As it was fate. Upon seeing Aruto, the girl immediately recognized him as her destined fiancé. Aruto was training with a sword when the teacher instructed the students to wield their weapons, as if they were actually fighting demons. He stated, "They can't make half-hearted moves. That is the goal of practicing martial arts. I will exclude anyone who takes this lightly." Although his tone was firm, he was not entirely serious. While Aruto was brandishing a dagger, the professor abruptly attacked him. Aruto dodged him, asking why the professor had attacked him so suddenly. The professor demanded Aruto's gun, stating that it was too early for him to wield it that way. Aruto possessed a dragon fang dagger, a rare and precious weapon made of dragon teeth. The teacher asked about its origin. Aruto thought to himself that he had forged it after slaying a dragon, but he knew that such a claim would be dismissed as nonsense. The professor then claimed that Aruto would never improve if he relied solely on his weapon. The professor declared that he would keep the dagger until Aruto's skill level increased, and then ordered, "Hand it over quickly." The other students commented that if Levanti, their teacher, was an upper-class adventurer, Aruto didn't stand a chance. Aruto remained silent, anticipating what would happen next. As the professor attacked again, he commented on Aruto's slow reaction time. Considering it unacceptable that Aruto had not already handed over the dagger, Aruto continued to dodge, determined not to be defeated. Aruto realized that the teacher was indeed a high-class practitioner. The professor, observing Aruto's evasions, wondered if Aruto, a simple peasant, was really able to dodge his attacks. Maybe Aruto was just lucky. Then he declared, "All right, let's play fetch." When he heard them, Aruto reflected. The teacher then said that if Aruto was not touched by the end of the class, he could keep the dagger. Aruto, however, could not understand why the professor coveted her so fervently. Levanti would not let Aruto pass just like that. Warming up, the professor declared that refusing would be considered a defeat, without offering concessions, even to a peasant like Aruto. His game had to start. Screaming, the professor pounced on Aruto, who deftly dodged his attacks. Despite its imposing size, Levanti moved with surprising speed. However, Aruto found it less intimidating compared to Magica. Meanwhile, the professor was internally marveling at how Aruto managed to evade every blow, attributing it to pure luck. Suddenly, Levanti unleashed air magic, an unexpected move for Aruto. The professor, when attacking Aruto, believed that he had caught him. However, his punch only hit the wall, leaving him in disbelief as Aruto vanished from that place. Aruto, now positioned just behind Levanti, realized how narrowly he had escaped. The The professor was clearly serious, employing offensive magic in bursts. The spectators cheered the teacher, urging him to keep his aggressive pace. Hana, however, remained silent, her gaze fixed on Naruto, anticipating his next move. As he continued to evade Levante's assault, Naruto wondered if the professor was really that determined. Cornered, Naruto reluctantly employed his distance reduction technique. In an instant, he disappeared from his place to a nearby tree. He reflected that he had barely mastered this skill that allowed him to travel short distances with incredible speed. Levante was getting more and more frustrated, unable to understand why Naruto was still so elusive. At this rate, I would surely lose. Just then, Naruto landed on the branch of a tree. The professor challenged him, asking if he really believed that he had escaped, and then pointed to Naruto's torn hem. He was so fast, Levante exclaimed, that he didn't even notice that his clothes were torn. The victory is mine. Naruto, seeing his torn clothes, realized that he had been watching his every move carefully. And Professor Levante had definitely not touched him. He deduced, this is the wind, the magic of the wind. Levante knew that Naruto would not make false accusations, but one of the other students claimed to have seen the teacher touching Naruto. Another agreed. Hana, who was nearby, thought that those guys were lying, since the human eye could not distinguish anything at such a speed. Naruto realized that his situation was serious. This was not a matter of distance or typical evasion. Levante extended his hand, demanding Naruto's dragon fang as he had promised. Then someone shouted for everyone to wait, claiming that the professor had not touched Naruto. It was Magic, who declared that she had been watching the game carefully. Naruto came down from the tree, asking what Magic was doing there. Magica replied that she was just passing through, then moved on to a more urgent matter. Is this man really a teacher? He asked, turning to Levante. Levante looked at the girl, recognizing a significant risk factor. Magic was a state-level threat. Having problems and arguing with her, he granted that it be so. Levante, recognizing his unique vision, turned to Naruto. She warned that even if it was just one game, if Naruto lost, problems might arise, especially now that she was here. Levante then suggested that they start over. He then unleashed a windbreaker, declaring it proof of his A-level adventurer status. He explained that it was an advanced technique, who infused magic into her hands, turning them into weapons, and challenged Naruto to try to dodge her. The next moment, Levante attacked Naruto, believing that he had him trapped. This magic not only increased the range, but also threw wind blades around the opponent. Observing Naruto, Levante considered him a mere student. If he died, it could easily be interpreted as an accident during training. Then, he ordered his attack to leave for Naruto. Naruto concentrated, recognizing the piercing sharpness of the wind blades. He decided to avoid even a single blow from such a powerful magic. Naruto skillfully dodged every blade. Levante, the teacher, was amazed, thinking that it was impossible for a weakling at the first level of life. However, a nagging doubt haunted him. Could anyone really defy the expectations of their rank? It was justified. It must have been an accident. Maybe it's just that I'm not feeling very well today. Levante tried to calm down. Still tormented by doubt, Levante drew his sword. As a teacher at the school, I couldn't tolerate losing to Naruto. He charged straight at him, sword in hand. Naruto could not believe that Levante had drawn a real sword, finding the situation increasingly desperate. The lesson was almost over. If he could evade this last attack, the victory would be his. Just then, other students questioned. As Naruto had managed to avoid the attacks, believing that he must have a trick, they mockingly declared that he should play fair like a man and grabbed Naruto by the legs. They urged him to attack Levante while they were holding him down. Totally surprised, Naruto stood helpless as Levante approached. Laughter erupted among the other students, but only Hana harbored a chilling thought. Is the professor really going to kill him? Levante scoffed to himself, believing that he could easily extinguish the life of a big shot in the first level. He refused to lose to someone like Naruto. The Levante attack pounced, a silent order for Naruto to die. With just seconds remaining in the lesson, Naruto used an Achian skill. The professor's sword flew out of his hand instantly, leaving him perplexed as to how it had moved on its own. Naruto then employed a distance reduction technique, instantly reappearing in a different location, still accompanied by the students holding his legs. After this, Naruto activated grave and argalization. The professor was defeated. Naruto declared that the teacher was unfit, blinded by greed and self-love, and then dropped the ball right next to him. The last few seconds passed, and the clock signaled the end of the lesson. Naruto had won. The students who were still holding Naruto's leg looked at the teacher's defeat with disbelief. Naruto announced that the lesson was over and asked them to release him. The stunned students slowly removed their hands from Naruto's feet. After the lesson, the students were abuzz with discussions about Professor Levanti, praising his coolness and lamenting that they would never be able to replicate his moves. They wondered if they could ever aspire to be as impressive as he was. Naruto walked behind the other students, realizing that no one really remembered him. He reflected on the omnipresent magic of this world. Just then, Magica ran and hit Naruto. Naruto didn't understand why Magica was calling him distracted, criticizing how easily it was mistaken for a backstabber. As punishment, he would have to attend his after-school training. Depressed, Naruto mentioned his plans to improve his blacksmithing skills today. He then claimed that he had not lost his dagger, suggesting to Magica to ignore him. But she insisted otherwise. Hana stood silently behind them, watching. Later, as the sun was setting, he began his solo training. During her training, thoughts of Naruto consumed her. Why was no one praising him? The professor was certainly skilled, but did it really seem only to her that Naruto surpassed him? People didn't notice, but Naruto sometimes even closed his eyes during the attacks. I couldn't understand how I managed to do it with just one standard of living. Hana, herself a level 4, felt that she could never imitate Naruto, believing that he lacked talent. He shook his head, dismissing those negative thoughts. A natural gift could not be replaced simply by effort in all aspects. Naruto probably trained incredibly hard. Clutching her sword, the girl decided that she too could achieve something if he was trying hard. The next moment, he dropped his sword, grimacing in pain. His hands were covered with bruises. Tears came to her eyes, but she decided to become stronger, not for someone else, but for herself. Naruto walked into the training room, bumping into each other. With Hana, he quickly apologized, explaining that he had not noticed any occupancy markers and assumed that the room was free. Hana asked him to wait, and then suggested that they have a brief chat. Naruto initially feigned deafness, but while she repeated her request, he simply stared silently towards the door. Sitting on the floor, Hana introduced herself as Hana Connell, commenting on Naruto's exceptional ability, particularly as no ordinary student could evade Professor Levanti. He wondered how Naruto had become so strong. Naruto stood by the door struggling with his resolve, well aware of the 5 years that remained. If I approach Hana now, I will only make her sad in the future, Naruto thought, deciding that he would simply keep an eye on her. Without turning to Hana, Naruto stated that his strength was the result of thorough training. Unexpectedly, Hana grabbed his hand. They were both visibly embarrassed. Hana quickly withdrew her hand, pulling away, as she apologized for her bold grip. Naruto looked at Hana, with a smile on his lips, while she regretted having touched his hand impulsively. She was exactly as I remembered her from then. Hana broke her self-absorption, asking him to listen to her. If she wasn't too much trouble, she wondered if Naruto would consider training with her. Despite his tireless efforts, he had not achieved any real success. Even with the guidance of excellent teachers, he did not make progress and constantly fell behind. Turning to Naruto, he expressed the feeling that if he taught her, everything would turn out fine, and then apologized for his abrupt request. Naruto listened intently, while she worried about whether she had caused him any discomfort. He noticed that his hands were covered with wounds and felt a twinge. The opportunity to communicate with her was slipping away. He was not sure what the best course of action was, but he found himself totally unable to refuse the sincere request of someone so diligent and so beloved from a past life. Naruto replied that if he really wanted to, he would lend him all his strength and help. Hana, beaming, extended her hand thanking Naruto. They shook hands. He declared that he would do everything in his power. Naruto smiled saying, "This is necessary. Fantastic. We will all try our best." Suddenly, some voices declared that they had heard everything. A bewildered Hana looked up, surprised. Leon stood in front of her declaring, "Friends of my friends are my friends too." Behind him, a girl was peeking out. He announced that this initiative was called Operation 100 Friends. Extending his hand to Hana, he offered her a warm greeting. She introduced herself as Lion, and asked if he could call her simply Hana. Hana, nervous, agreed that she could. Seeing Lion, Naruto grumbled, "Friends of friends. What the hell are you talking about? We're not even friends." Lion was very offended, and Naruto had to calm him down. Meanwhile, Magica introduced herself to Hana as Magica Stead Charo, and said she could call her simply Magica. They shook hands. Hana, noticing the three-part name, asked if Magica was of royal lineage. Magica explained that, yes, she was from an old royal family. The squirrel family had lost their power. The royal lineage no longer retained its former strength. Leon and Naruto were listening attentively to Magica. Leon abruptly interrupted, demanding to know why he had not been informed of his royal ancestry. Magica stated matter-of-factly that it was obvious because she hadn't mentioned it. Lion exploded, proclaiming that if she was truly blessed with a royal birth, then his own rare heroic talents paled in comparison to hers. Looking at Magica, she continued, "I thought she was just quiet. How could such a small creature be of royal blood?" As expected, they immediately started arguing, while Naruto and Hana watched from the barrier. Hana turned to Naruto, asking if they should intervene. Naruto reassured her by stating that Lion was unusually strong, and that he would be fine. He couldn't defeat a single demon before, but now he possessed the strength to compete with Magica. Naruto knew Hana would make it. He would definitely become stronger. A few days later, not far from Epona, the group went into the forest to train. Naruto introduced Hana and Lesline. Together, they tackled obstacles and challenges as a team. Periodically, Naruto offered help to Hana, asking if she was okay. She confirmed that yes. Then Magica asked about Hana's level. The girl revealed that she was level 4, but lacked talent, which prevented her from developing skills beyond level 1. Hearing this, Magica and Lion stared at each other, asking if Hana was joking. "How could someone not possess any innate talent?" Lion exclaimed. With tears in her eyes, Hana apologized. Naruto told Lion to measure his words. Lion, however, declared that it was great, to everyone's amazement. Leon clarified that, although a gift of talent helps in the development of skills, it does not dictate the only path of a person. Skills are not inherently tied to a specific lifestyle, and lacking such a gift does not mean that you cannot forge your own path. Isn't it wonderful? He asked. Naruto came up with an idea. Leon was right. Hana had never heard such an interpretation of lack of talent. Naruto commented that it was a brilliant idea. "I couldn't believe it came from Lion." Magica confessed that she always thought Lion was an idiot. Everyone looked at Lion, who then asked why they had such a low opinion of him. They arrived at a lake, considering it a suitable place. Hana, curious about the training, suggested practicing with the trees since they were in the forest. Naruto explained that this training would be in real conditions. From now on, Hana would face real monsters. The revelation surprised Hana. He stared at Naruto, declaring that it was impossible that he could do it. "I couldn't kill a monster like that all of a sudden. His level was 1, he reminded Naruto. Had I forgotten perhaps? The three of them, including Naruto, fixed their gaze on Hana. She reiterated that she couldn't defeat monsters without experience. Naruto, taking something out of his bag, reassured her. "Everything is fine," he said. "I won't let anyone hurt you." Just at that moment, some goblins materialized in front of them. Lion protested that Naruto was being too cruel to Hana. Magica added that Naruto didn't need to attract so many goblins. Naruto announced that he had an idea. He turned to his friends, beckoning them closer as he whispered his plan. His friends understood immediately. "The plan is truly worthy of a master," Lion replied. Both Magical and Lion were inspired and ready for battle. Naruto then handed the sword to Hana. announcing that they were ready to start. Hana, however, admitted that she was not ready yet. Naruto expressed his confidence in his teammates, and together, they launched into battle. Magica skillfully dodged the goblins. He jumped up, quickly realizing that eliminating them one by one would be a waste of time. Unleashing an area attack. Knowing that his power was more than enough for such monsters, that was the usual strategy of magic. Meanwhile, Haruto activated a glowing stone, joining the assault against the goblins. Hana watched in amazement the strength of her companions. Just then, a goblin swooped down from the bushes, and she realized that she was completely unprepared. Naruto protected her instantly, closing the distance in a jiffy, determined to keep Hana safe. After dispatching the goblin, Naruto turned to Hana asking if she was injured. She replied that she was fine. Naruto then realized that the time had come. Just at that moment, Lion was run over by the goblins, shouting that he had let his guard down, and that he was surely doomed. Hana saw Lion buried under a pile of goblins, and screamed for help. He turned to Naruto, exclaiming that Lion was in trouble. Naruto, pushing a goblin aside, apologized for being busy momentarily, and then calmly told Hana to save him. Hana, hearing this, protested that she couldn't, but Naruto assured her that everything would be fine. The monster's attention was solely focused on Lion, giving Hana a chance to attack from behind, but she was full of doubts. Naruto, however, believed that everything was going according to plan. Naruto's strategy depended on Lion's abilities, his exceptional distractibility, his remarkable physical prowess, and his immortality. These traits allowed Lion to remain the main target of goblins indefinitely. With Lion attracting the enemy's attention, Hana should be able to take care of the immediate threats. She and Magica could then deal with the remaining goblins. The crucial question, however, was whether Hana possessed the courage to defeat the monsters. Hana wielded her sword with trembling hands, overwhelmed with fear. But if it wasn't her, then who? Determined to remember her training, she attacked a goblin from behind, causing an injury. Tears welled up in her eyes. Magica observed that the wound was too minor to be fatal, but suspected that Hana's psychological damage was much greater. Naruto was watching Hana, who was visibly terrified. His friend had been attacked right in front of his eyes, and he blamed himself for his fear in a similar situation, agonizing over his weakness. Just then, Naruto called her, assuring her that he could do it. His voice was full of confidence. Hana gripped her sword tightly, and determination took hold inside her. He wanted to become stronger. If Naruto was by his side, he felt he could find the courage to be strong. Hana charged at the goblins, brandishing her sword with newfound strength, as her inner monologue declared an end to her self-pity. Determined to become strong, she moved forward relentlessly. A goblin shot an arrow at Hana's back, but Magica intercepted it. Magica reprimanded the goblin for interfering, returning the arrow with the same force. Hana attacked the goblins again, and after parting 1 and 2, a surge of confidence came over her, realizing her growing ability. Suddenly, Hana staggered, almost losing consciousness. Naruto caught her, his voice tinged with concern as he asked if she was okay. She apologized to Naruto, explaining that she was simply feeling dizzy. Naruto informed him that it was due to a level increase. Hana was exultant, her mind racing with the confirmation of her leveling up. Then, Hana burst into tears on Naruto's shoulder. He had been waiting for this moment for his entire 15 years. His moment was interrupted by Lion, who complained about the time he had to stay there with the goblins still piled on him. Naruto admitted that he had completely forgotten about Lion. Hana, meanwhile, was wondering how Lion could keep his cool. Lion, bleeding and still immobilized by the goblins, declared himself quite brave, stating that such monsters could not harm him. Naruto then revealed that it had been a plan to encourage Hana's bravery. Hearing this, Hana understood everything. Hana let go of Naruto from her hug, who then suggested they take a break until she calmed down. Hana replied that she was fine and ready to continue. Naruto smiled at him, nodding. First, he called his slim Ro and asked him to retrieve his sword. Naruto then offered Hana the same sword. It was a sword forged from dragon bone. Naruto explained that the sword was made of dragon bone, and that he had forged it specifically for Hana, using his blacksmithing skills. Taking the sword in her hands, Hana thought it was really beautiful. Behind her, the goblins were already ready to attack Hana. Putting down his sword, he attacked them. After dispatching the goblins, he marveled at the properties of the weapon, wondering how such a powerful attack could be unleashed. With a simple flick of the wrist, he exclaimed that he could not wield such an incredible sword. Naruto pointed at the sword, affirming his belief that a tool in a person's hand can teach him. This sword was meant to make her stronger, Naruto explained. Sure that he could become stronger now, she urged Hana to believe in herself. Hana squeezed the handle harder, according to Naruto's words. Magica and Lion simply smiled as they watched Hana. Naruto announced that they would continue to help her level up for a while. They would gradually increase the number of opponents, carefully monitoring Hana's progress. Moments later, Hana was back in combat with the goblins. Soon, they thought they had defeated them all. Naruto ran to Hana, praising her good job, and asking if she was hurt. Naruto wondered what level Hana had reached. Checking her condition, Hana asked Naruto to look. Naruto then saw that Hana's unique talent had manifested itself. His level was 31, and the talent was called the Germ of a Hero. Naruto approached Hana, and, seeing her talent, the Germ of a Hero, asked Lion if he had ever come across something like this. Lion in turn turned to Naruto, asking him if he himself had ever heard or seen such a talent. Magica, standing behind them, heard the mention of the hero germs, and immediately realized that Hana was the person she had been looking for. The world of fortune was ruled by 6 gods. Get Out, god of war. Diatonic, goddess of life and birth. Samadas, god of craftsmanship. Na-S, who controlled the soul and destiny. Fortemis, god of justice and order, and the chief deity of the Swirl tribe. And Emma, O and Loa, lord of nature. Magical, princess of the Swirl tribe, had been born from the divination of Rigging and Loa. The prophecy declared that, together with the hero, she will transform this world. Magica's mission was to find the owner of this heroic gift and become his right-hand man. 7 years after meeting and working with Naruto, he had finally found a hero. Hana's talent remained undeveloped, probably due to the machinations of the god Fortemis. The cult of Fortemis, with the largest number of followers in the world, wielded tremendous power. The kingdom of Aponia, where they were currently located, fell under their rule. Under the guise of justice and order, Fortemis ruthlessly eliminated anyone who displeased him. Hana's talent for changing the world had been suppressed all this time, probably because she posed a direct threat to Fortemis. Upon observing Hana, Magica realized that Naruto had broken the seal. Following Naruto had been the right decision. Now they just needed to see if they could cultivate Hana's talent. Just then, Naruto called Magica, asking her if she had any ideas, noticing that the girl seemed lost in her thoughts. Magica replied that nothing was wrong. She reflected that revealing the truth about Hana's heroic gift now would only burden her. It was still too early. At that moment, Hana turned around, apologizing, and suggesting that they return home since morning had arrived. He was also worried that his butler was anxious. Upon hearing this, Naruto agreed. Hana had already raised her level more than enough. Hana then turned to Naruto, saying she had another request. Naruto wondered what he would ask her. Then, embarrassed, Hana asked if they could go to her house together. Naruto replied that he would need an explanation to come back so late. Naruto recalled visiting Hana's house after training in his previous life. He had wounded her then, enraging the butler. He realized that they really needed to go together. Turning to Magica and Lion, Naruto asked them to visit the guild first and sell the big stones. When they arrived at the house, Hana and Naruto looked at her. Naruto thought she was so beautiful that he felt he would never get tired of looking at her. Hana asked Naruto if he was surprised, explaining that the first head of the Kennel family had been one of the founders of the kingdom of Aponia. The doors opened for them, and they entered the mansion. As they walked down the aisle filled with portraits, Hana talked about her family. All subsequent members of the family had been exceptional, playing many important roles in the history of the country. Naruto then asked her if she would follow in his footsteps, and she affirmed it. His lack of talent was therefore a monumental problem. Naruto simply remained silent. The next moment, they entered a room, and Hana asked Naruto if she could wait. "I won't be long," she added, to which Naruto nodded, sitting down on the sofa. As Hana walked into the room, Naruto said that the butler could leave now. Appearing to Naruto as if out of nowhere, the butler, surprised to have been discovered, introduced himself as Klein. Klein, head butler of the kennel house, asked some questions about Naruto, asking if his assumption that the young man's name was Naruto was correct. Naruto noticed that since the butler was here and had been hiding, he probably wished to talk in private. The butler praised Naruto's insight and asked to get straight to the point. What was Naruto's purpose in approaching Hana, given that there were about 30 other students? Klein wanted Naruto to explain why he had chosen Miss Hana. Naruto knew that it was no secret that kennels represented the highest nobility. If he claimed that it was a mere coincidence, the butler, considering him a commoner, would never believe him. So Naruto explained that he and Miss Hana, despite their lack of talent, seemed to understand each other. "We've both experienced a similar standard of living, knowing what it's like to be a beggar," Naruto elaborated. Klein, looking directly at Naruto, simply replied that Naruto and Hana shared similar circumstances, acknowledging that it must be difficult for Naruto. In fact, Klein observed, "Miss Hana has started to smile a lot more often lately, and it seems that it's thanks to Naruto." The butler then thanked Naruto while serving tea and proceeded to ask one last question. Klein asked what kind of relationship Naruto imagined with Miss Hana in the future. Naruto, after placing a cup in front of him and hearing the question, remembered his past and replied that he hoped they could become the best of friends. The butler remained silent. Then, turning to Naruto and sweeping a cup from the table, he declared, "This can't be. You're just a commoner." The next instant, the butler was holding a knife to Naruto's throat. With the blade pressed against Naruto's neck, the butler declared that Naruto's desire to befriend a noblewoman was outrageous. "Never again," demanded the butler. "Will you get involved with Miss Hana?" Naruto watched the butler, noticing the abrupt and unnatural change in his behavior after their initial friendly interaction. This sudden hostility mirrored a past event when Naruto had inadvertently harmed Hana, and Klein's anger had erupted. It was as if an invisible force was manipulating his emotions, feeding his anger towards Hana and trying to trap Naruto in the same tragic fate he experienced in his previous life, a consequence of Fortima's omnipresent magic in this world. If Naruto remained silent now, history would undoubtedly repeat itself. He had to alter his destiny, jumping backwards. From his chair, Naruto confronted the butler, demanding to know why he couldn't contact Hana. The butler scoffed. Does Naruto not understand that a lady is considered unworthy if she associates with commoners, especially those of a significantly inferior position, and even more so if that individual presumes to be his intellectual equal? Naruto, however, believed that it was the butler who lacked dignity. "I knew that Hana had become significantly stronger during her training. She might even stand out among the D-class. Had Klein really done something for her in the last 15 years?" "Years?" The butler vehemently denied this possibility. Naruto replied, affirming the truth of his words. Hana had remained on level 1 all this time, and Klein had simply kept an eye on her, without trying to facilitate any real growth. "Isn't that a lack of dignity?" Naruto declared, snatching the knife from the butler's hands. He then revealed that he was aware of the presence of 5 other butlers hidden in the room with stealth abilities. Pulling out a handful of knives, Naruto showed the weapons he had taken from the hidden butlers. The first butler seemed to be the strongest of them, Naruto claimed. "But if I could disarm them all so easily, his true skill level is far from impressive. And what would I do if the situation got out of control?" Naruto then challenged Klein, asking him if his noble dignity would really prevent him. Witnessing this, the butler questioned the entire purpose of Naruto's actions. Just at that moment, the door opened. Hana came in, apologizing for the wait, and offering to show Naruto around the palace. When she saw Klein, she asked him why he was present. Aruto smiled, commenting that the butler was treating him like a friend. The butler replied that he and Miss Hana knew each other, which made their presence completely natural. Aruto then expressed his hope that they would see each other again soon. Bowing to Aruto, the butler echoed his sentiment, looking forward to their next meeting. They left the room and continued through the palace. As Aruto walked behind Hana, he considered that his actions, although potentially punishable as aggression, were the only way to instill the necessary fear. He reflected on his past life. They were killed by Sumijin, who had appeared without warning and was unstoppable. If Aruto and Hana had prepared and strengthened their defenses, everything could have been different. They were the only ones who could have survived that tragedy, Aruto realized. Hana turned to Aruto, trying to get his attention. Lost in his thoughts, Aruto simply murmured, "I'm sorry." As Hana opened the bedroom door, she commented on how unusual it was to see him so distracted. They entered Hana's brightly lit room, noticing the neatly arranged objects everywhere. Aruto realized that it was the first time he was in his personal space. In her previous life, she had never ventured beyond the living room. She wondered, was this really Hana's bedroom back then? Hana confirmed that it was indeed her bedroom, much to Aruto's surprise. He then explained that it was customary among the nobility to invite close friends to his private chambers, and wished to thank him properly. Hana turned to Aruto, expressing her deep gratitude. Aruto, however, claimed that his new strength was his own merit. He had only helped. Hana, blushing, admitted that she had anticipated that same answer from him. Hana started, "If Aruto doesn't mind, we could." Aruto didn't let her finish, his mind racing with a grim revelation. In her previous life, Hana had also confessed her feelings to him, and offered to be with him, but now she couldn't allow it. Accepting his confession would mean swearing his life to him, leading them to dream of a happy future, and, inevitably, repeating the tragedy of the past. I knew I had to turn her down for Hana's sake. Hana, blushing, then asked him if he would be her best friend. Aruto was completely taken aback, totally unprepared for such a question. The embarrassed Hana was standing before him, waiting for his answer. Aruto, blushing, mentally rebuked himself. How could I have thought that he was going to declare his love to me? What was I thinking about? He felt a twinge of shame. Upon seeing him, Hana asked him how he was doing, then suggested he sit down, and offered her his hand. Aruto replied that he would certainly be happy to be his friend. Smiling, Hana thanked Aruto and expressed her joy. She reflected that, although she could not yet say whether he would be her boyfriend, there was no need to hurry. I could spend a lot of time with Naruto now. A moment later, Hana said goodbye to Aruto, thanking him for the day. Aruto apologized for staying so long, and then noticed a sword next to a glass display case. Aruto approached the sword about to speak, when Hana noticed his intense concentration. This sword is made of a very rare mineral called orichakan, Hana explained, adding that it was forged for the first head of her family, after the War of the Gods. Upon seeing the leaf, Haruto finally understood that it was the orichakan, experiencing its presence for the first time. Hana revealed that it was an heirloom of the carnal family, but no one had been able to wield it. Aruto wondered why, as the sword didn't seem heavy enough to warrant such a restriction. Regarding these restrictions, Hana explained that a powerful force was imbued into the sword, destined to fight for everything important in the world. However, it became unusable after the first head of the family participated in the foundation of the kingdom. Hearing this, Haruto simply contemplated the sword, reflecting that perhaps it was because one couldn't fight for other countries' interests, while protecting one's own. Still, Hana turned to Aruto and asked if he was sure he didn't want to have dinner with her. Aruto, although pleased, had to refuse. It wouldn't be right for a commoner like me to stay here all night, he explained. Hana affirmed her reasoning. Aruto, turning to Hana, apologized for leaving, but offered to see her tomorrow at school. He then declared to Hana that they were best friends from that day and forever. As Aruto was leaving, a gloomy thought crossed his mind. The tomorrow they were hoping for might never come. He wanted Hana to remember his presence in this world, no matter what happened. Hana watched him leave. Aruto knew that Hana's death was only 7 hours away. Aruto returned home and was greeted by the slime. Upon entering the house, Aruto announced his return and then asked if the goblins had sold magic stones. The slime quickly regurgitated a stack of coins. Aruto observed the large amount. "You'll have to ask the others to give Hana coins," Aruto instructed. Hearing this, the slime seemed surprised, as if asking a question. Aruto asked Ru to stay in Lion or Magica's room today, as he had personal matters to attend to, and asked Ru to send his regards to them. Ru approached Aruto, who wasn't sure if the slime was protesting. As Ru was getting on it, Aruto realized that it hadn't happened. A lot of alone time with Ru lately. Smiling, Aruto hugged Ru, holding him close. Later, after Ru had fallen asleep and the night had completely fallen, Aruto simply looked out the window. Aruto knew that his mage-an would soon appear on this road, in the direction of the Kennel family house. Aruto had intended to intercept him here, that's why he chose this particular room. He then summoned his skill table, wondering if he could really defeat Sumijin with his current stats. Should he find himself unable to resist once more? In his previous life, Aruto had never imagined such weakness. Now was no time for doubts. He had risked everything for this day. All that was left was to fight with every ounce of his strength. Aruto was determined to defeat his Mijin, no matter the cost, to avenge everything he had endured in his past life. That day, a blanket of sadness covered the capital. It was unclear whether the cause was a fire or an attack by demons. From a rooftop, Aruto watched the scene, noticing a burning mansion near the royal castle, the Kennel House. Everyone inside had been killed. Running towards the burning structure, Aruto was desperately trying to understand what had happened. Her only concern was Hana safe? As he approached the house, Aruto saw a stranger. The butler was standing before this man, protecting Hana and her mother. The stranger declared that was why they understood everything now. Holding an energy sphere in his hand, the man stated, "At this very moment, Hana Kennel will die by the will of the ruler." The butler then asked, "How was this possible?" And the same Sumijin Silsu, one of the 12 generals of Aponi, would carry out such an act, the man replied. The 12 generals of Aponia are the government. In addition, they are a detachment that works for the good of the country. This was an order, and everything Sumijin did was completely legal. Doesn't the butler understand that a simple servant shouldn't have interfered? Staying to defend Hana and her mother, the butler, baffled by the decree, listened as Hana's mother asked why the government was doing this to her daughter. Addressing Lady Hana, the butler declared, "How can there be a decree ordering the murder of a 15-year-old girl? Years. As your butler, I will show no mercy to your Mijin, even if he is one of the 12 generals, if he hurts Lady Hana." When the butler tried to attack, his Mijin repelled him with a single finger. Sumijin noticed the butler's determination, reflecting that he had hoped that the Duchess's butler might, for once, make him feel something. However, the butler had disappointed him, so Sumijin burned him, confirming his gruesome fate. Hana, witnessing this horror, shouted Klein's name, extending her hand towards him in disbelief. Aruto was simply observing the situation unfolding. Sumijin dismissed everything as useless, admitting that even after killing the butler, he didn't feel anything. The magician reflected that he might feel something if there was more at stake. He turned to the girls asking if they understood. Hana looked at her mother, who reassured her that everything would be fine, and that he would protect her. Hugging her daughter tightly, she whispered, "I love you, my sweet Hana." Hana's mother stepped forward to protect her daughter, telling the magician to stay away from the young girl. He declared that his aim was to destroy the dukes. Sumijin replied, "It's not that at all. From this moment on, the Kennel family will be safe," Sumijin announced. The original plan was to exterminate the entire family, but the owner of the house obeyed the king's order. Hana's father disowned Lady Hana in accordance with the king's decree. Hearing this, the mother screamed in disbelief, while Hana's face broke down as she realized her father's betrayal. His Mijin claimed that the real duke knew that he was more important than this girl. He knew what weighed more even than his wife's life. "You are still the duke's wife," she sneered. And then he went through the woman declaring that abandoning her daughter for the sake of the family was a sovereign stupidity. Watching it all, Hana was sitting sobbing, with her mother already dead. Sumijin commented on the beautiful expression on the girl's face. Maybe she is just like me, because God's will is paramount. But, above all, I want to know if people really exist, he reflected. Then he asked Hana if she ever felt that people in this world only seem to have their own will, but in reality, they are nothing but illusions created by God's magic. Sumijin admitted to having performed countless experiments, but he could not find an answer, hoping that the girl could tell him whether it was an illusion or a person. Through tears, Hana claimed that she was a person. Sumijin demanded immediately, "Who allowed you to speak?" "I was asking your soul." Hana recoiled in fear, and Sumijin seemed to take delight in the expression on her face. It seemed like I was finally starting to understand something through her. He threw a flurry of wind swords at Hana, watching her reaction, and declared, "This is perfect. The girl is the best." Aruto came out of hiding, demanding Hana's release. Sumijin turned around upon seeing Aruto, who then found himself unable to move. "What a perfect moment," commented Sumijin. "Because you, young man, can't even believe that you have the right to exist." Approaching Aruto, Sumijin stared at him and declared, "You don't deserve to live. You're just a kid who dared to interrupt my research. And by doing so, you're practically begging for death." Sumijin considered killing Aruto, but then remembered that he couldn't just take the life of someone unrelated to the kennels. Turning to Aruto, he proposed a different approach. He came up with a brilliant idea that prompted him to conduct an experiment. Aruto would be the observer, while he proceeded to kill Lady Hana. Lady Hana's grief mixed with Aruto's despair would allow her to truly experience what it meant for people to exist, instead of being mere illusions. What a brilliant plan! He reflected, reaffirming his belief that Sumijin was undeniably a genius. Aruto silently extended his hand, trying to reach Hana. Sumijin observed that Aruto could not even scream, explaining that this was due to his standard of living. An immutable law of fortune, the very will of God. He advised Aruto to understand this concept fully, because having been born with only 2 weeks to live, Aruto could only sit in silence, completely helpless. Aruto desperately wanted to move to beg his Mijan to stop, but Sumijin unleashed the full force of his power on Hana, and the girl perished. Aruto could only watch, tears streaming down his face. Sumijin then declared the mission complete. He feigned regret, but the magician felt absolutely nothing. The next moment, he casually threw Aruto aside, who lay crying, tormented by his failure to save Hana, by his own deep weakness. Sometime later, Hana's body was discovered under a watermill in a stream on the outskirts of the city. A letter found with her claimed that she lacked talent and could not bear to dishonor her family name. The handwriting on the note was clearly not Hana's, but it was presented as proof that she had orchestrated her own death. Aruto sat by a window, remembering these events, and vowed not to allow such a tragedy to repeat. With only 1 hour remaining until Hana's death, suddenly, a figure in a raincoat appeared on the street, and Aruto immediately pounced on him. Sumijin asked who he was, and Aruto introduced himself as just Aruto, a commoner with the first standard of living. Sumijin looked surprised. Aruto then revealed, "You are the 12th general of Aponia, Mr. Sumijin Silsu, aren't you?" The magician replied that if Aruto knew this, he couldn't just leave, as he had some unfinished business. Aruto replied that he couldn't, because he was there to put an end to this stupidity. Upon hearing the word stupidity, Sumijin claimed that he was simply fulfilling a royal order. Since Aruto intended to stop him, he would simply have to eliminate Aruto. Aruto felt the familiar paralysis. Sumijin had used his mission, leaving Aruto immobile. The magician attacked Aruto with his staff, admonished, "Get out of my way. How dare you interfere with me? You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." Aruto was only staring at Sumijin, who couldn't understand the look in Aruto's eyes. Pushing him further would be useless, so Sumijin urged Aruto to surrender, throwing Aruto against the wall. Sumijin wiped the sweat from his forehead, reflecting on the strangeness of losing his temper. It struck her as peculiar how stubborn some children could be, A simple mishap often upset everything. The next instant, Haruto materialized before Sumijin, wielding his dragonbone dagger. Sumijin hadn't anticipated this at all, and then a change in Naruto's displayed stats indicated an increase in stamina. His standard of living had risen from 1 star to 2. The magician noticed Naruto's attack, unable to comprehend as a child with only a first level of life. I could deal him a blow. What exactly was going on? Naruto recalled that during his week of training with Magica and Lion, he had already adjusted his standard of living. The main problem had been the enemy spells, specifically submission. But he had anticipated that with his current experience, he would soon develop resistance. As expected, the restriction was lifted after several attacks, and Naruto reflected that everything was proceeding according to plan. Naruto had never imagined that his fundamental state could change. However, he had successfully altered its level, a feat considered impossible by the laws of the world. This must be the power of the talent of creation, Naruto reflected. Naruto seemed to have woken up. Watching Naruto from the air, Sumijin wasn't sure what trick Naruto was performing. However, Sumijin informed Naruto that his interference would not alter. It would make the outcome inevitable. Naruto replied that this was not at all a decision of his Migen. Recognizing Naruto's genuine confidence, the magician scoffed. What could such an insignificant fellow hope to accomplish by defying the power of my staff? Dodging, Naruto marveled at the lightness of his body. The enormous amount of mana he now controlled was incomparable. Confident that he could cast any spell, Haruto admitted to the wizard. Yes, I may be an insignificant magician, but I intend to protect my loved ones. Naruto then summoned a flurry of spells, the concentrated fire magic of a fleeting torch, the concentrated ice magic of an icicle coffin, the concentrated air magic of a stormy ascension, and the water magic, concentrated from a hydraulic explosion. Witnessing this, Sumijin understood everything. Naruto was simultaneously using several advanced level spells. This was no ordinary fight that could be won with bare hands. A continuous assault was necessary. Sumijin realized that by recognizing Naruto's power, he had already escalated the confrontation. Sumijin unleashed a deadly flash of black ash at Naruto. In turn, Naruto counterattacked with all his spells. Observing the oncoming attack, Haruto realized that his 4 spells only amounted to one of his Migen, confirming his Migen's reputation as the best mage in the country. However, Haruto discovered that Sumijin's ability wasn't as overwhelming as he initially believed. With this level of challenge, he saw a clear opportunity for victory. The next instant, Naruto unfurled water balloons, creating a dense cloud of steam. Sumijin quickly recognized Naruto's tactic, understanding that his goal was to cloud his vision. Naruto immediately cut the distance, attacking Sumijin with his sword. Sumijin stopped and dodged every blow without missing. Sumijin stated that Naruto's efforts were a nuisance, reminding him that defeating one of the 12 Eponian generals was far from simple. Naruto struggled to understand how his Migen dodged his attack so perfectly, recognizing his opponent's formidable agility. In addition to his magical prowess, determined not to fail again, Naruto prepared for another assault against Sumijin. Sumijin, perceiving Naruto as an annoying and persistent fly, deployed a highly sensitive mana net, concentrated. Within this area, he could detect the slightest movement or flow of mana. He challenged Naruto to enter, warning him that touching the net would be his downfall. When Naruto approached the net, his Majin initially believed he was attacking. However, he quickly realized that the network had not registered Naruto, who had subtly changed his trajectory. Not detecting active magic, Sumijin wondered, what exactly is Naruto doing? The next moment, Naruto hit Sumijin, who could hardly believe it had happened. Naruto declared that the fight was over. However, his wife, to his astonishment, began to thank him, mentioning a gentleman. Looking up, Naruto noticed that a street lamp was plummeting straight towards him. He managed to dodge her, prompting the wizard to comment that Naruto wouldn't appreciate his thanks. Even so, the magician questioned Naruto, demanding what kind of trick reflected the magic of his Migen. I could not detect its activation yet. That was my magic, wasn't it? Naruto internally confirmed that this was a trick he had implemented specifically for this battle. His plan was to use steam to disorientate the magician. forcing him into a confined space. There was only one step left, and it was not a mere accident. If a god had really intervened, Naruto wouldn't have had a chance from the beginning. While Naruto was pondering this intensely, the magician, having received no reply, decided that if Naruto did not wish to reply, it was not really necessary. Using the oracle of the god Fortemis, the magician then declared his order to eliminate the hero's germ as soon as possible. However, the appearance of such an obstacle suggested something deeper. Upon hearing germ of the hero, Naruto wondered why Sumijin knew about this talent. He decided to question the magician further about it. Sumijin praised Naruto's quick reaction, and then asked him if he had ever heard of the hero's talent. He explained it as a rare gift, which appears only once every century. Historically, this gift always manifests itself just before a great war. Although the hero's talent sounds great, it is actually the worst of all. His very existence sows discord in the world. Therefore, the god Fortemis tries to eliminate the hero, while he is still a happy one. Sumijin was a trustworthy individual. Naruto now understood the stupidity of his past actions. The magician then turned to Naruto, explaining the situation. Naruto, addressing the magician, proposed that perhaps it was the opposite, catching the magician completely by surprise. Naruto then claimed that it was not the hero who caused the discord in the world, but the discord in the world that caused a hero. The magician challenged Naruto to prove that statement. Naruto admitted that he could not, but argued that the probability of his theory being true was greater than zero. The magician claimed that he appreciated a doubting mind, but insisted that without a theory, Naruto should remain silent. He concluded that it was time to end this, attacking Naruto and asking him if he would finally surrender. Naruto realized that the magician was attacking him even from point-blank range. Sumijin observed that Naruto showed no fear. His face was devoid of all pain. However, even upon seeing him, the magician felt nothing and demanded Naruto's death. Was it really impossible? So they fought. Naruto understood that if God intervened again, he would keep fighting until it happened. Naruto tried to dodge the wizard's attacks. Noticing Naruto, the magician felt a change in the atmosphere. The next instant, Naruto punched the magician directly in the face, catching him completely off guard. Naruto continued with several more blows, declaring, "It's already too late." Sumijin could not comprehend what was happening. Naruto was moving with a drastically different attitude than before. He had not given his best until that moment. As Naruto pinned the wizard to the ground, Sumijin felt his body suddenly become impossibly heavy. What was it? Was it really a weight spell? Wasn't it lost during the war in the Age of the Gods? Even being the greatest magician in the kingdom, he found himself unable to counteract this magic. But why this cordon off? Maybe Naruto has been casting a spell on himself all this time, exposing himself against him. At that moment, the magician shouted to Naruto to disappear. What a lack of respect. I would never forgive Naruto. As Naruto witnessed the power that the magician concentrated on the staff, he realized its true nature. The mana was pulsing erratically from the staff, and Naruto, observing this, understood that he would not be able to withstand such a power. No artifact could accept such an amount of mana. Was there a celestial crystal installed on the staff? The magician declared that it was too late for Naruto to realize anything. This crozier is made from the bones of dead kings and orichalcum. It is a masterpiece of kingdom technology, and the main element of the staff is an artificial celestial crystal. If used, it will cause huge damage to the area. He was sure that he would lose his position as general of Epona, but that no longer mattered. From the one who mocked him, he would not leave even in the ashes. Rising above Naruto in the air, the magician ordered the staff to unleash the absolute power of absolute death on Naruto, demanding ruthless destruction, and Wasa the artifact of the setting sun mourner. Naruto understood that he could not evade this blow, escaping from the area of immediate destruction. Naruto prepared himself. The magician landed, thinking that Naruto possessed the strength of a first-class magician. But Naruto played, and to think that he spent almost all his mana on a simple peasant. The wizard regretted not having killed the Kennel family a long time ago, having heard that an experienced majordomo was working for them. He had hoped to retain his magic. Anyway, he needed to get to them, making his way through the avalanches. But then he saw Naruto standing before him. Unable to understand how it was possible, or why Naruto was still alive. Naruto, looking at the bleeding wizard clutching his hand, realized how close he had been to death the moment the magic was released. Naruto had activated his prepared trick. He endured the blow as long as he could, simultaneously activating the tomb and falling into a crack that he created himself. Naruto avoided a direct hit, but the shockwave itself was powerful enough. If this technique had been released when Naruto was at full magical power, he would definitely have died. Firm where Naruto was, the magician warned him not to approach, and then hit him on the head with a stone. Naruto, struggling to stay on his feet, knew he could win. Compared to the pain of losing Hana, the magician's attacks seemed insignificant. Approaching the magician, Naruto declared him a weakling. To protect his loved ones, he would defy fate and face the threat head-on. The magician was fired, now lying unconscious right in front of Naruto. Naruto drew his sword, holding it over the magician. I knew I had to kill him while he was on the ground. Otherwise, Hana would be in danger again. He considered that this was his opportunity. His previous attack had proved effective. He was sure the same tactics wouldn't work again, so he had to kill him now. However, he hesitated. Just at that moment, Lion arrived, jumping from the roof. "Master, what happened?" he exclaimed, bewildered by the scene. Naruto recognized Lion. Lion ran to Naruto, asking what had happened, but he tripped, twisted his leg, and collapsed. Naruto sheathed his sword. While Lion was tying the magician up, he felt the gravity of the situation, but assured Naruto that everything was fine. "The Bill Summit Han has been captured," Lion declared, "killed by me and twice by Master Lin." Naruto corrected him, explaining that he hadn't really defeated him. "Anyway, Hana is just a talent, a germ of a hero." "What nonsense," Lion muttered, stating that it was impossible to take his life. Naruto admitted that Lion was right, but his trembling hands prevented him from striking the final blow. Lion approached Naruto, explaining that it was natural to hesitate when taking a life. Killing demons was a completely different matter. Sumidron had caused immense damage, and Lion was sure that the government would take care of him. He was relieved that Naruto was unharmed. Seeing Leon before him, Naruto smiled. Leon then helped Naruto to his feet. Leon confessed that he was still stunned by the fact that Naruto had defeated one of the 12 generals of Epona, declaring him a true master. Naruto insisted that this was not the case. Naruto explained that his victory was only due to unforeseen circumstances for Sumidron. He had caught Sumidron by surprise and fought in a situation where Naruto had an overwhelming advantage. In fact, if the circumstances had been different, he would have suffered much worse injuries. Naruto realized that the most crucial reason for his victory was the significant increase in his standard of living, which by itself greatly enhanced his status. Naruto reflected that if he had only had one level left, he would certainly have perished. Leon observed Naruto deep in his thoughts, and noticed that he didn't seem to be well, asking him if he could move. Naruto replied that he was fine, just thinking, and then asked if he and Magica shouldn't be together. Leon explained that no, as she had left the hotel before him. Naruto then asked where he had gone. Leon claimed that no one knew. It was a magical decision. Naruto assured her that she would be fine. Suddenly, Naruto pushed Leon, even though Leon was helping him to walk, feeling that something was happening between them. Naruto realized that he had not fully recovered yet. In addition, he saw Citri standing before them, who greeted him, commenting that it had been a long time. Leon turned to Naruto and asked who the girl was. Citri, puzzled that Naruto didn't remember her, reminded him, "I am Citri Justice, the one who helped secure the dragon's bounty, one of the 12 generals of Epona, an officer of the Council of True and False. How can you not remember if you still have a brain?" Lion, observing her hair, wondered about the spirals, and thought that the girl looked like a villain. He approached Lion, criticizing Naruto's lack of style for not appreciating the beauty of his hairstyle. Naruto replied, "You mean you're the only one who has feelings for him?" Turning away from Lion, the girl asked what was wrong with him. He declared that he had had enough. They couldn't waste their time arguing with a stupid commoner. "I'm here for Naruto," she said. Pointing a finger at Naruto, the girl declared him evil. Naruto was taken aback by this statement. What nonsense! Leon replied, defending Aruto. It was not Aruto who devastated the city, but his Mijin. The teacher did nothing wrong. The girl replied that, of course, she was aware of the situation. His Mijin had been dismissed from his post as a general, and measures were being taken against him, but that was none of his business. His mission, he declared, was to eliminate those recognized as evil by God. On behalf of the Judicial Council of the True and the False, he declared, I condemn you for your sins. Then he pounced on Aruto with his sword. Still dazed, Aruto sat down on the floor, realizing that he was being attacked once again. This time, Leon stood in front of him, sword drawn, protecting him. Leon questioned the role of the judicial authorities, asking if it consisted of murdering innocents, and stated that he would not allow a single finger to touch his teacher. Setri repelled the attack, rebounding. His attack blocked by Lion's sword, he reflected out loud that he had dismissed him as a mere muscular fool, but that he was clearly very skilled. Lion, in turn, challenged her, asking how she intended to defeat him with such a thin sword, stating that he would take care of her himself, not Aruto. Firm behind Lion, Aruto asked for caution, explaining that the girl's weapon was special. He asked the Lion to trust him. Lion advanced towards the girl, offering to attack, and calling the curly-haired villain. Aruto tried to warn him. At that moment, the girl hit Lion, and Aruto felt the danger immediately. Setri then claimed that Lion could not defeat her, successfully injuring him. Lion, initially immune to pain, explained that his maximum resistance to damage meant that the blow should not have hurt him. However, at that instant, he felt a sharp agony, and blood gushed from his hand. Aruto could only gasp his name. Grasping his hand, Lion understood the intense pain. Aruto, getting up and shouting Lion's name, ran to his side asking if he was okay. He did not understand how Lion could get hurt, as Lion believed that his resistance to pain was absolute. Then, looking at Setri, Aruto realized that she, despite her appearance, had activated a special ability. Aruto explained that the sword was an artifact that embodied his belief in absolute justice and belonged to Setri. Compared to Saimajin and the other 12 generals, Setri's inherent strength was significantly lower. Aruto even suggested that Lion possessed greater brute power. Lion still couldn't understand how the girl had hurt him. Aruto clarified that that was precisely the reason why they could not win. The weapon cursed opponents stronger than its wielder. Setri, understanding Leon's superior strength, had intentionally attacked him to activate this curse. Consequently, Leon's damage resistance was nullified, leaving him deeply injured. Aruto explained that she could not be neutralized with a single blow. She revealed that even a simple brush on her hair had the same devastating effect. Inflicting too much damage would cost them their own lives. The stronger Aruto became, the more difficult the victory would be. It was through this weapon that Setri Justice maintained dominance over the 12 generals and Euponia. Hearing all this explanation, Leon found it deeply unfair. He questioned Aruto. How could they defeat the girl then? Setri, observing Aruto, realized that he possessed an unusual amount of knowledge. She questioned him. Did he use this weapon in Naruto? Addressing him directly, she pressed him. And where did you acquire such extensive information? She even speculated whether he had fought her in a previous life. Naruto dismissed it as a silly joke, warning that if he was just buying time to recover, he wouldn't allow it. Suddenly, an explosion went off, leaving everyone bewildered. Seeing the explosion, Aruto realized that it came from Kennel's house. Then he wondered if someone other than Sumajin could be attacking them. Aruto turned to Lion, urging him that they should hurry up. A moment later, they saw a blinding light. Aruto felt a power that far exceeded that of his Mijin. Realizing that Han was in danger, they found themselves pursued by Setri, who remarked with disdain, "Did you really think you could escape from me in that state?" At the same time, Setri reflected that it was that noise. Was his god's fortune shining through? He observed Aruto, who seemed to be lingering, with conscience tormented before the gods. He was right, she wondered, was he trying to run away? He moved to end this by attacking Aruto with his sword. Aruto, consumed by his own thoughts, wished he had truly defeated Sumajin, but he still couldn't save Hana. Unexpectedly, Ru turned out to be useful, as Aruto never imagined that he would resist Citri. Aruto grabbed the slime, baffled by Ru's actions, and initially thought it was a joke, as the substance spread through his hands. Aruto tried desperately, understanding, pleading with Ru to respond and not die, citing the countless memories that bound them together. The next moment, Aruto was left with only a single split ball. Citri sat in front of Aruto, who was furious that she had killed Ru. He unsheathed his sword, determined to attack her. The next moment, Aruto found himself back in the familiar void. The figure on the throne commented on Aruto's ignorance about the artifact's curse, greeting him with a comment about how much time had passed. This was the entity responsible for sending Aruto through 2 lifetimes. He expressed his unimpressed reaction to Aruto's loss of control in a fit of rage. Did Aruto already know about the horror of the artifact? Aruto realized that this was the same place he had arrived at in his previous death, which made him believe that he had died once again. A chair materialized behind him, and the entity offered him sit down, stating that they now had the opportunity to talk again. Aruto asked if he had died, to which the entity replied that he had not. His soul had simply reached its limit. He could be reborn, although his current body would be discarded. His soul, however, would remain as it was in his last life. The entity noticed that Aruto was living a much harder life this time. Shaken by Ru's death, Aruto's soul had been a mere millimeter away from total annihilation. Aruto claimed that he had already died. He then demanded that it be returned immediately. The entity stated that before doing so, it had a question for Aruto. What would he do when he returned to that world? Aruto declared that he would kill Citri the moment he returned. He would take revenge for Ru. At that moment, a crack opened under Aruto. The entity then informed him that he could not return to that world. Aruto, puzzled, asked why, given that the girl had killed his most loyal companion. The creature then questioned Aruto's purpose. He reminded Aruto of the request he made when he arrived just before he left. As the creature spoke, Aruto remembered his smiling hand. Seeing that Aruto's memory was being removed, the creature affirmed their shared goals. They could not stand idly by while his soul was destroyed before fulfilling his purpose. He advised Aruto to calm down, and then reiterated his question. What would he do when he returned to this world? Aruto realized his burning desire for revenge for Ru, but understood that surrendering to emotion would only lead to the loss of even more beloved individuals. He had started this new life specifically to save Hana. Aruto explained his resolution to the creature, which then confirmed his understanding. Risking his own soul, Aruto intended to save someone dear to him. For this reason, they had sent Aruto towards victory. Aruto declared that he would resume his bet, stating that there was no possibility of repeating until his soul was completely consumed. The blade stopped a few centimeters from Citri's face. He stared at Aruto, urging him to wait and calling him a sinner. Aruto reflected that his sword was exceptionally powerful against powerful adversaries. However, there was also an ability designed to exploit weak opponents, although its use would curse the wielder in return. In addition, he considered that Citri should have suffered significant damage during his assault on Ru. With a firm look, Aruto told her that he no longer had time to waste with her. Citri was visibly shocked by his statement. Turning to Lion, Aruto ordered him to evacuate Ru to a safe place. Lion then asked if Aruto intended to proceed alone, insisting that he would accompany him. Aruto then turned to Lion, explaining that he didn't want Ru to suffer anymore. His plan was for them to get back together once he saved Hana. Until then, Aruto himself was responsible for taking care of Lion and protecting Ru. Lion, in turn, stipulated that Aruto must protect Hana and return alive. Aruto smiled, stating that he would do exactly that. Saying goodbye to Aruto, Lion turned to Citri, telling her that she should have run away. Citri, however, failed to understand its meaning. Lion addressed her, pointing out that, as one of the 12 generals, her lack of understanding was alarming. He reflected that perhaps this kingdom was really coming to an end. While Lion was talking, other beings began to descend from the sky. Magica ran with all her might, sensing that Aruto was in battle. He felt her powerful magical energy, and assumed that she was probably fighting her Mijin, realizing that she needed to help him. Simultaneously, an alarming presence hovered over the kennel house. He wondered if it was the work of the god Fortemis. Only today had the gift of the germ of God appeared in Hannah's life. Magica understood that the divine forces were stirring, even before the hero germ matured, but she didn't think it was necessary to evacuate Hannah yet. Then he witnessed something coming down from the sky, detonating the house. They were the shadows of God, and Hannah was in grave danger. Upon entering the house, Magica witnessed how the shadows of God massacred its inhabitants. Realizing instantly that Hannah's parents and the butler were already dead. Vowing not to let them touch the god embryo, Magica fiercely fought the shadows. Then he heard Hannah's scream from upstairs. Realizing that numerous shadows were blocking her path, Magica ordered them to make way, making her way through them as she ran towards Hannah. A shadow of God stood in front of her, throwing a sword at Hannah. Magica begged Hannah to resist. Her own sword struck the shadow, and, recovering it, Magica addressed the girl, grimly informing her that her dad, mom, and all the employees were dead. Magica hugged Hannah, scolding herself for her delay, but assuring her that everything would be fine. Although Hannah was crying, Magica swore to protect her, assuring that the shadows would never lay a finger on her again. Aruto also rushed into the house, realizing with a heavy heart that everything was unfolding exactly as before. Defeating Sumijin had not altered fate. If so, then Hannah must be dead by now, Aruto thought. Just at that moment, Magica called him with Hannah standing safely behind her. Aruto felt an immense relief that Magica had saved the girl. Turning to them, he asked if they were injured. Magica interrupted him, stating that explanations could wait, and urged them to listen carefully. What appeared in heaven were the shadows of God, and now something bigger and stronger will emerge. There's almost no time left. At that moment, Haruto saw another entity descending from the sky. He initially thought it was a demon, but then realized that he couldn't believe what he saw in front of him. The same feeling he felt when fighting demons was magnified into an even greater power. If natural demons arose spontaneously, this was an entity created on purpose by God. He was a good devil. Aruto then worked to undo the Achium he had established during his battle with his Mijin. He understood that this would neutralize some of the magic. Thanks to his new resistance to this difference, Aruto felt that he could act. She instructed Hannah to stay still, as she could now fight effectively with her drawn sword. At that moment, the demon approached, attacking Aruto. Aruto realized that his speed was immense. As he was facing the demon with his sword, the weapon shattered under the attack. The dragon fang dagger was harder than nitrile. How could it have broken? Aruto wondered, evading the girl's relentless attacks. Magica intervened, defending herself from the demon, and Aruto thanked her. The girl warned her to stay alert, as even she had a hard time keeping track of her enemy. The artifact she carried marked her as a heavy warrior, but her prowess rivaled that of magic, a trait of the Swirl tribe. He was a creation born of God. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Aruto understood that they needed to separate. He instructed Magica to take the vanguard, while he covered the rear. Magica nodded, understanding the plan, and launched her attack. Magica, whose speed could rival that of her opponents, would face her directly. While the two girls were colliding, Aruto took advantage of the opportunity by using a debug to aim at the demon. Coinciding with Aruto's movement, Magica, fully understanding his tactics, pressed with her attack. Aruto, directing beams of light, positioned them to follow Magica's movements, while she dodged the enemy's attacks. Aruto landed another blow from a blind spot, hitting the demon directly in the back. The demon registered the blow. The damage was minor but undeniably effective. Suddenly, the girl's wings shone with a greater intensity, disconcerting Aruto. The next instant, she attacked him with a flurry of feathers from her wings. Aruto realized that their large number made evasion impossible. The razor-sharp feathers cut it from all directions. He decided to activate his Akeo ability, but at that critical moment, his ability was not activated. A feather pierced his chest, sending Aruto flying backwards, crashing into the nearby kennel house. Magica shouted his name, calling Aruto. Naruto was lying on the ground, not responding. A feather was lodged directly in his heart.